day of the semester. And normally what happens is, when it's like, 2-3 weeks ahead for the exam, I need to start studying. And there are certain situations where I don't sometimes even have the notes. And then, do I need to start studying immediately without, eating, without sleeping? Would that work? Do you think it will work? Yes or no? Yes. You might collapse at the exam. Okay. Then how do you start? How do you start? You sit back a little bit and you try to, think a little bit, right? You might pick certain priorities. Right? Okay, this particular subject would be quite good. Maybe I need to, study for that. This particular subject, lecturers might be giving more marks, so I need to, study for that subject. That's a reality, right? And then you pick your priorities, isn't it? And then you plan certain actions. You agree with me or you don't agree with me? You do it, right? So, what is that? It's a kind of a process. Remember, we only need a process if we have limited resources. When I use the word resources, it can be time, it can be skills, it can be information, anything. If the resources are limited, if we want to get the maximum throughput, we need to have some kind of a process. Normally one of the myths that people have in the industry is actually we need to have a process to streamline things, and it's an overhead for us. If a process is an overhead for a particular team or an organization, then it's not a real process. Maybe the process is not the best process that they should follow, or maybe they are not doing the process right. If it's a process, it should help the people to get the maximum throughput, given that you have lots of constraints. Okay? Right. Okay. With that mindset, maybe we'll start today's session, and a very brief agenda on what I'm going to talk. I will talk a little bit about Agile, and then Scrum, and a little bit about Kanban, and then I will touch on the very high level on Kanban and different scale Agile frameworks that we have. Maybe that's safe and less as well. But again, I was thinking maybe some of the contents that I have, you all might be already aware of those contents. So because of that, sometimes certain sections I might skip under the assumption that you know these concepts. And please try to interrupt me at any time. And if you have any questions, always interrupt me and ask those questions then and there. You don't have to wait till the end of the presentation to ask questions. This is a very small audience, so we can always incorporate those questions, and then asking questions will be beneficial for all the others as well. Because then I know your context, and then I can answer the questions that you have. Because in a larger context, different people will have different questions, and I will try to answer the questions that you have. Okay? Right. Okay. Now, since I've been told that you all are kind of experts in Agile, what do you mean by Agile? Okay, so thank you. So what you are saying is, it's trying to understand the customer's needs and trying to give what is best for the customer. Let's say if we take any process, maybe rational unified process or maybe waterfall, isn't that what we are trying to do? I'm not saying it's wrong, it's correct, but it's not the full picture. It doesn't give the full picture, isn't it? If we do software development and if we do it for customers as a vendor, then that's what we are trying to do. That's what we are supposed to do. Right? So what differs Agile from maybe the other different approaches? Always customer interacts with the development team. Good, thank you. That's one aspect. Yes. What else? that's another thing. Yes. Thank you. One, try to deliver what is the most important thing for the customer. Yes. Okay. Yes. Flexibility. You welcome changes. Thank you. Yes. What else? There was another. Accommodate for functional change. Thank you. Yes. Good. What else? So it's like trying to be like this. If we try to, sum up all the answers that you all have given, can you give me a kind of a one single sentence answer? Agile is actually, it's more like a mindset. It's not exactly a set of rules or a set of things that you have to follow. We are talking about a mindset here. The way we should think. So, I mean, if we try to, get all the answers that you all have given, trying to deliver value to the customer, trying to, incorporate changes, trying to, be closer to the customer. I mean, if we put everything together, it's a mindset that we all should have. Whether it's software development, whether it's cooking at home, or whether it's driving a vehicle, same rule applies. Same rule applies. And that's where, in certain situations where the complexities comes in. Because we know the concepts, we know the four core values and the principles, and if we ask about those values, everyone knows. But the problem is, are we going to apply those concepts in the real life? Sometimes we do, sometimes we do not do. And that's where the problem is actually in the industry. Okay, I think the next section actually I will very briefly run through the basic concepts and we'll see how it goes. And if you feel like it's boring for you all, maybe I can skip that section as well, because I know that you all are kind of familiar with Agile, and just going to maybe starting off with the traditional way of development, like for example waterfall. I think you all know what kind of challenges that you might face if you take a kind of waterfall-like approach. Can you just support me with some of the challenges that people would have?
Customer sees the final product in final stage of the development process.
Very good, thanks. Customer only sees the final product at the very final stage. So what does that lead to?
There are some risks. Sometimes customer maybe rejects the product. He don't do this thing, some kind of some maintenance trouble. Sometimes they request other functionalities. When we can't implement it, we won't implement this again. We should go to our first stage.
So it's normally we call it like misalignment.
Yeah.
This is what the customer expects, and this is what we have delivered, and there's always some misalignments at the end. Good. What else?
Human error. If you have some human error at one stage, you can affect the next stage, and you can't go back.
Yeah, it's like if you make one mistake, it might propagate to the end, and then to fix it, it takes a long time, and the cost is very high.
And the process itself is not geared for that.
Exactly. Yes, process itself is not supported for that, but you still can do it, but the cost is again very high.
Business requirements and customer needs will be changed every time. It's hard to change.
Yeah, very good point. It's business requirements keep on changing all the time, and then it's very hard to give all the requirements at the very beginning. Normally, we call it as customer needs to think ahead. It's like forecasting. If I ask you what will your basic needs in 5 years' time, can you answer that question? It's very difficult, isn't it? Because the environment is dynamic, it keeps on changing, and what we expect in 5 years' time or maybe 2 years' time, it's very difficult for us to predict. And if you think about business solutions, it's even more complicated. So then what happens is customer needs to focus on different possibilities, and they need to give all the requirements, whether it's needed or not, but still they need to give those requirements at the very beginning, at the requirements analysis phase. So it's very difficult. What else? And then again, the flexibility, as you mentioned. It's very difficult to, incorporate changes because the entire cycle is very rigid, so that you have to go all the way back to the beginning and then redo everything. So it's possible, but the cost is again very high. What else? And then the visibility, as you mentioned. It's like, customer only sees the product at the very end. Even though that's a very, good product, but still the customers might feel uncomfortable. Why? They will only have the interactions at the requirements analysis phase, and then maybe during the testing or the maintenance phase. So there's a very big gap, and then the customer doesn't know what we are doing. So it creates a kind of a, a question mark on the customer's hand. And then misinterpretations, as you mentioned. There can always be misinterpretations because, again, we are talking about complex business solutions and the expectations of a customer and what the vendors are delivering. Okay, and then slow and low deliveries, and of course, I think you know about this as well. If you all have done projects with this kind of approach, at the end it's always stressful because towards the end of the delivery, nothing is working, and you need to make sure that every integration does work, and it doesn't work. And then the customer is unhappy, you are stressful, you simply can't eat or sleep, you have to work 24 hours. It's very stressful, and it doesn't give the expected outcome as well. Okay, having these kind of different information, I think you all know what Agile Manifesto is, so I will not talk about Agile Manifesto, but I think you know about the 4 values and 12 principles. The only thing that I need to highlight on the 4 core values is actually the footnote, even though it's a footnote. Because there is a kind of a myth or an interpretation that people say Agile is about not having documentation. Agile is not about having processes. But it clearly says, while there is a value in the items on the right, while there is a value, we value these ones most. So it is needed. Like for example, the company that I work for, IFS, we are a product-based company, and we get revenue from license sales. So to have license sales, we need to have contract negotiations. And we need to have that. If not, we simply can't sell the product. So it is needed. And since it's a very large product, when we move to the support phase or the maintenance phase, we need to have the comprehensive documentation so that we know what we have developed. It is needed. But what Agile says is, instead of process and tools, we value the interactions most. And instead of documentation, we value the working system most. So it's about giving more value to the items on the left, while making sure that these concepts are also valuable. So that is quite important to know. Any questions or any thoughts that you have? Yeah. Okay, I will try to explain those things in the next slides. Okay.
Just want to know whether we have learned the Agile Manifesto in the previous courses. Have you learned that one, Agile Manifesto, in one of the previous courses? The third year? Anything? Or second year?
Okay. Because I asked the question saying software engineering. So then they should know what it is. Okay. Anyway, if these kind of words are kind of alien to you, don't worry. I will touch those concepts when I have this, detailed explanations as well. And then when it comes to principles, Agile talks about 12 different principles. I mean, again, I will not expect you to go through all these principles. You can always just Google Agile Manifesto and you can get the four values and the principles. And then when it comes to principles, I'll try to explain some of these principles using, very simple examples. And the first principle, what it says is early and continuous delivery. What does that mean? Maybe I'll try to take a very, very simple example. example everyone knows. Let's say we work in a kind of a construction company. So our job is to make houses and then sell it to the general public and get money. And then let's say we have a kind of a very good skill set of people who can build houses with different sets of skills. And we know that a rough estimation to build one house would be 6 months. And then this particular project is for building 6 houses. So we know very roughly that it might take 3 years to finish this project. And then we need to build 6 houses and then we need to sell it. That's the objective of our organization. Now let's say we have all the different skills and material and everything, and we need to think about 2 different approaches. What would be the approach that you would take? Trying to make things very simple. Let's say that to build a house you need to lay the foundation, then you need to build the walls, and then you need to build the roof, and then it's done. So just trying to make things simple. So what would be our approach, starting approach for this project? Now I'm thinking about the process now. How we do things. How? Okay, let's say we have a plan. We know what the plan is. So it's about executing that plan. Okay. Again, trying to make things simple as possible. Then
one house, then sell it. Again build one.
build one house and then sell it. Okay, why do you say building one house would be good?
If we try to build 6 houses and after that we try to sell it, customer means architecture, sometimes customer likes will be changed.
Okay.
And it takes long time to comes revenue.
money. Good. Good. Thanks. But then again, having his thoughts, what he says is maybe building one house and then trying to sell it. Again, my question to you all would be: is that an efficient way of doing things? You can have your different thoughts. There's no right or wrong answer. Just try to express your thoughts. Building one house, selling it. Yes.
Economics of scale and learning now that might not be efficient, but at the same time, continuous stream of revenue spread out throughout the years for you on the business property.
Okay, right. So what? Your answer for my question would be: it's not an efficient way of doing things. Are you all agree with me? Or do you think still it's an efficient way of doing things? Let's just assume that we start off with laying the foundation for all the 6 houses. What will happen? You can buy raw material for all the 6 different foundations. So then the unit cost, what will happen to the unit cost? It will go down because you buy in bulk, right? And then when you think about the people who are going to build the foundations, let's assume that to build the first foundation it takes 2 months, maybe too much, 1 month, and for the second, third, fourth, and when they reach the 6th foundation, still will they take still 2 months to build the foundation? Might not, right? The people might get specialized because they have been building the foundation all the time. So when it comes to their skill levels, it would have improved as well, isn't it? So when it comes to, if you think only in terms of efficiency, this approach would be the most efficient way of doing things. Same goes with building the walls as well as the roofs. But as you mentioned, the problem would be now it has taken, let's say it's not since people has got specialized, maybe we would have finished this project within not maybe not taking 3 years, maybe after 2.5 years we will be done with 6 houses. But still there will be some challenges for us. One would be, we have 6 houses to be sold and it might be slightly outdated. Why? Because it has taken 2.5 years to build these houses. So after 2.5 years, the people's expectations or the people's, what people expect from a house would have been different. And on top of that, we have, it's not only one, we have 6 outdated houses to be sold, and we have not earned a single cent. So we have been spending and spending and spending for 2.5 years, and we need some money back quite soon. And then how shall we say, sell those houses? Maybe in Sri Lanka, how do we do it? We apply the label sale, isn't it? What happens, if we apply the label sale, whether you want it or not, normal people come and buy, isn't it? You reduce the price a little bit and you put the label houses are for sale with low prices, maybe with some benefits or maybe discounts. People will come and buy. That's how people do marketing in these type of countries. Okay, right. Then the other approach that you were talking about. You start off with one house, you build the foundation, you build the walls, and then you build the roof. And then you are done with one house. Maybe it would have taken not 6 months, it would have taken 8 months. Because you all were concentrating on just one house. So is it efficient? It might not. It might not. But still, what are the benefits that we might have? Most probably this would be a modern house. Why? It has only taken 8 months. We are talking about 2.5 years. So after 8 months, still this would have been a kind of a modern house at that time. And then you have a modern house, and then you are about to sell it. So that means just after 8 months, you are about to earn some money. And you have a modern house, just one house to be sold. What will happen? Supply and demand. Yeah. Supply is low, the demand becomes high. So do you need to apply the label sale or cost reducted houses? No. You can even increase the price of the house. So again, a different question. Is this an effective way of doing it? It might. It might. I'm not saying it's yes or no. Why is that? When you carefully listen to me, you will realize that when I say certain things, I will not say things in a certain level. Why is that? Exactly. Everything is relative. Everything is relative. And especially in Agile, we simply can't say right or wrong things. It's about doing things in a better way. There can always be improvements, and when you do a change, it might result a failure as well. It's all about trying to do things in a different way and see whether we can get some benefit out of it. And normally in Agile, we use this term called, in Agile we don't have best practices. It's because we simply can't. We always have better practices. Because the best practice that we think we are doing today might not be the best practice after 6 months. Why? The surroundings have changed. The expectations have changed. The technologies have changed. Okay, if I touch this stuff. And then the second point, welcoming changing requirements. And since you all have done software engineering, you know that when you do a design and then when you start implementing, and if you want to do a change on the design, it's about refactoring the code. And normally refactoring adds an overhead to what you do. But contrastingly, what Agile says is to welcome changes. So changes comes with a cost. It doesn't come, as it is. But the problem is, if you take the traditional development, you start your development and the customers might have a certain set of needs. And when you start the development and when you start your project, and towards the end of the project, what happens is there will always be a shift on the customer's needs. Again, why? Because the environment is changing all the time. The environment is changing all the time. The business requirements are changing all the time. The businesses are changing all the time. And then you will always have a gap on whatever you have developed with what the customer needs. And that's why Agile talks a lot about welcoming changes. So what it does is it goes on short feedback loops. You try to get the feedback during short term from the customers. And whenever there is a shift on the customer needs, you always try to move towards the shift. And remember, this adds a cost. Refactoring is a cost. But what we need to make sure is actually we need to visualize those costs for the customer. And if the customer still thinks, even though this is of this XYZ cost, but still if it adds a value to their business, the customer will still say, yes. It's not about, trying to work extra hours all the time and trying to, add 1 to 10 plus another 50. It's not about that. It's about visualizing the constraints and visualizing the challenges and the cost that it will involve. But if it's something that the customer really needs, the customer will still go for it. Any thoughts or any comments that you have? Okay. This one I can skip, I suppose. It's again an example. Then delivering frequent delivery. Getting short feedback loops, and the third principle is about delivering frequent. What does that mean? And what's the benefit of this? I don't know whether you can remember, but I still can remember when Gmail was launched long time ago. How did they start? Do you know at least that history? They started with a simple mail sending and receiving feature. That's it. Even the draft facility was not there, but still it was on the production. Because they were, if it's a mail client, you should be able to send mails, you should be able to receive mails. That's the basic principle. So they started off with that. And then they deliver it to the production. They deliver it to the customers. And then on top of that, they build the other features. If you can remember the very old interface, I still have it with me. It's because you try to deliver things as quickly as possible for the customer. Then you get a competitive edge in the market. Whether what is the version that you use or not, it doesn't really matter. It's all about delivering the features as quickly as possible. Because if you develop a kind of a very fancy, very well defined solution, but by the time you are done with your solution, if the customer does not need that solution, the value would be zero for the customer, even though it's a very fine product. Because the customer's requirement has already passed. Whether it's not the perfect solution, but still if you can deliver it quickly, the customer might still get a benefit from that. And as software engineers, as architects, what we try to do is to maybe try to give the best possible solution all the time. And by the time we are thinking about giving the best solution, the technology has evolved, the customer's expectations have evolved, their business has changed, then there's no value. And we always get the complaint, we have put so much of effort on this particular product and we don't get the positive feedback for this product. It's because you have been late delivering it to the customer. Sometimes you get very positive feedback on the customers by just adding a simple field. So as software engineer, it's a job for us, right? Adding a field will take just 2 minutes. But maybe developing a kind of algorithm could take weeks. But for the customer, that is very important for their business. So it's all about trying to deliver things as quickly as possible. Another classic example would be Chrome. And if I ask you the question, comparing maybe Chrome and something like IE, and if I ask you what is the version of Chrome that you use, normally people will say, we don't know what the version is. But still, whatever the features we need, normally they are available in Chrome. It's because they are trying to deliver it. Normally Chrome delivers multiple times per day. It's all about delivering frequently. Okay, and then business people and developers must work together. The other concept is working together. This is also a kind of a very important fact when it comes to agile teams. Working together. What does that mean? I think you all might have seen this example I'll try to say. Let's say you have different people who are responsible for different parts of the organization. You have your sales people who will sign the contracts and who will negotiate with the customers. So their responsibility would be on marketing your product and making sure that your sales agreements are done. Then you might have your business requirements, business systems owners or business BSS. They will try to look at the functional requirements and they will try to, elaborate what the customer needs. And then we always have our mighty software engineers where, who are kind of very technical and who does the complex solutions. And then you have your testers who will do their testing. What they say is, fortunately the requirements do not state anything about usability and performance. So it's like, whatever being defined in the initial state, what is customer needed, is being tested, that's it. And then you might have, technical guys who do the deployment on the customer sites. And if we have people working on different silos, trying to, optimize their local goals, what will happen? Maybe this might be something that you all have already seen. It's like, if customer, again, forecasting things, the customers will try to elaborate all the possible features that the customer might need. It's not the features that the customer needs, but they will think these are the features that might need. And then, you will have the analyst who will understand the customer's requirements like this. And then you will have, your designers who design solutions like this. It's not finished. And then you might have your software engineers who will write code like this to give a solution for the customer. And then this would be what your marketing guys will describe your product to the customer, how it looks like. And maybe this is what the customer actually needs. From a swing to a sofa. Why? Because customer is very afraid to mention this because he knows that, whatever which is being defined at the very beginning will be what that the customer will get. So he'll start off with this. So it's not about having a common goal. It's all about trying to localize, so sub-optimize the things that we do. But in Agile, what they say is working together. Whether you are a technical writer, whether you are a software engineer, whether you are a BSA, whether you are a tester, whether you are a customer, whether you are a sales guy, all of us should have one common goal. We should be focusing on one goal. It's about delivering the value to the customer. So working together plays a big role here. Any questions that you have or any comments that you can make from your experiences on industrial placement?
So in the industry, mostly customer interact with BAs.
Okay.
So some set of things and agreement and they came us to and they say to developer.
Okay.
But sometimes their requirement couldn't implement it, not practical. So there are some discussion and when that situation, what happened?
Okay, very good question. Thank you for raising that up. But I'll try to give you an answer, kind of indirect answer to you with a very simple real life example. Okay? This is a kind of a experience that one of my friends had. He works at my office, which is at Developmet, and he lives at Ratmala. And by that time, his father was working at the cricket board. So his office is at Maitland Place, where we have the cricket board. So one day, actually, he called his father around 4 p.m. and then asked him, Tati, are you going home today? The answer would be obviously yes. At what time are you going to leave? Then it's very difficult. Even if that question was asked from me, it's very difficult for me to say because it's not like getting up from my seat at 5 o'clock and going home. So what he said was, maybe I'm just trying to go home around 5 or 5:30. Then he said, okay, what's the route that you're going to take? And he was saying, okay, I might take the duplication road. I need to meet a friend as well. And then he said, okay, so if you meet the friend, what will happen? Then his father got fed up, and then he asked another question from his son. Okay, I hope everyone can understand Sinhala. Can you all understand Sinhala? What he said was, so it's like, what's needed to be done? Then he said, okay, then he realized that he was asking or shooting the wrong questions. He said, Tati, there is a cricket match being played between Sri Lanka and another country. It's a day-night match. I need to be at home before the second session starts. That's his requirement. So then he realized that he was trying to sub-optimize things and he was trying to find a solution himself. Instead, he would have said to his father, "This is what I need." So if everyone have the big picture, it's always very easy to find a solution. Even in your case, I will not agree that when you say the word industries, it doesn't happen every time, but it happens in certain situations. I agree on that. But what in Agile, what we talk a lot about is actually trying to give a common vision. There are so many software engineers who does very fine coding, but they do not know what it is being used in the real industry. Then it's like trying to do something which you don't know how it is being used. But if you can understand the customer's mindset and what is being used, then it's very easy to find solutions. So that's why it says having this common goal. Okay, as an organization, this is what the customer's problem is. We are trying to find a solution. Let's another simple example. Let's say if I want to define this, let's say I'm the customer and I want this particular controller to control my PowerPoint remote. Then I would have said, okay, I need a controller where it has page up and page down buttons, which activates on Bluetooth, and there should be a Bluetooth receiver who takes a signal. So if I try to define my requirements like this, you will start developing this as a software engineer or as a electronic engineer. But if I say, okay, as a presenter, I should be able to control my presentation remotely. So that's my actual need. So if I put my requirement like this, you all might ask me a question. Okay, are you doing presentations all the time, or you need this for just one-off presentation? If it's a one-off presentation, what would be the solution? Maybe you will keep one person here sitting, and when I scratch my head, he will press the page up, and then if I scratch my nose, he will press the button page down. It will work. It's the quickest, effective solution. So I need it for the presentation which I am going to do tomorrow. But if I say, I will do presentations on a regular basis which will last for 4 hours at different locations, okay, then maybe a different solution would work. So it's the way you define things. Whether it's software engineering, whether it's whether you talk with your child at home, same rule applies. But when you try to sub-optimize things, he will think in different angles and he will always try to fail. So same rule applies in the software development context as well. Thank you for the question. Okay, that means you need to work together. To work together, since we all work in distributed environments with people with different religions, different cultures, different countries, we need to have the technology. Like for example, having common goals, and then getting quick feedback, being open. Yes.
Ambassador use a concept, is it an extension of that, or?
Can you elaborate that a little bit? The ambassador.
Where I have ranked in my master's and they have a representative from the client organization who comes and works with the developer.
Yes, true. That works in certain situations. Like for example, let's say the company again that I work for, it's a product-based company. So it's a product which is being used by different parts of the world. So it's very difficult to get the requirements from a single point, because different regions will have different requirements. So then we have a similar kind of setup where we have people, we have a particular role called regional representatives, where a particular representative from a particular region comes in with their view. And all the different region representatives gets together and they talk to each other, then they will have another common view. So sometimes depending on the business context, that is applicable, because you simply can't get everyone together in one room and get the requirements. It might end up in a chaos.
So do you have these forums, video conferencing?
Yes, it can be forums, it can be video conferencing, it can be on-site meetings, it can be face-to-face meetings. It depends. Depends on the project, depends on the complexity of the project, depends on where they live. Okay, then Agile talks a lot about being motivated individuals as well. Why do we need to have motivated individuals? It's all about developing the product, right? Why do we need people? People are the people who do the development, isn't it? Okay. Normally, I mean, again, in theory, what they say is, when it comes to people's motivation, they talk two things: the hygiene factors and the motivators. Do you know what hygiene factors are? Maybe by this time of your life, maybe you are only concerned about the hygiene factors when you go to the industry, maybe at the beginning. What are hygiene factors? It's about the benefits that you could get. Maybe your salary, maybe your ability to take vacations, maybe the work environments, the different things, tangible things that you could get, benefits that you could get from the organization. And normally what they say is, if the hygiene factors are not there, people are extremely dissatisfied. But on the other hand, there's another saying. Even though the hygiene factors are there, more than expected, but still, the people will not be extremely satisfied. That's kind of strange, isn't it? And that's where these motivators comes into play. And when it comes to motivators, it's the other way around. Even if you don't have the motivators in an organization, people will not be extremely dissatisfied. But if you have the motivators together with the hygiene factors, people will become extremely satisfied. So extremely satisfied people means a better product. Normally, if you want to sustain in the business, you need to make sure that you value your product and the people who develop the product. There is a correlation. You value your product because that's where you get your revenue. But similarly, you have to value the people who develop the product because they are the people who are skilled enough to develop that product and who are motivated enough to develop that product. So both has an equal value. And when it comes to motivators, there are different angles that you can touch on motivators. Things like team empowerment. What does team empowerment mean? Do you know what empowerment means? You are given the ability to take decisions. Okay, will it work all the time? True. Will it work all the time?
Depending on the individual's maturity.
Depending on the individuals or the team's maturity, it might be. There's again a misinterpretation in people. What they say is, if we work in agile team, the empowerment should be given to us all the time. But in real business environment, it will not happen every time. It's because you should be able to earn your trust to be empowered as well. That is also very important. You have to have that mindset. If you don't work or act in a way where you earn your trust, you will not be given the chance to be empowered. Remember that also. To do that, you have to earn your trust as well. It's all about, again, teamwork. It's not about individuals, it's all about working in teams. And then, do you like to work in a team like this? We call it as self-organizing teams. What does self-organizing means? Team can discuss and organize without any interference.
From the outsiders.
Okay, good. Thank you. Anyone else can add something to that, the same answer? Why do you mean by the word self-organizing? Can you give an example for a self-organizing team or a system?
When you put the regular requirement, the team members, depending on the expertise and experience and the amount of work we have, they can take over the design.
So it's like you try to give your expectations, or you try to visualize your common goals, and then you let the system to organize itself to the best possible way where you can deliver that solution. In simple terms, yes. Again, will it work all the time? Like this. You have people who are trying to control the team. You let the team decide what they need to do. Will it work all the time? Why do you say it's no?
Depends on how well the people in the team can work together. Because
Depends on the how well the people in the team work with. Okay, again, try to go in the same line. There's a saying like this, you sketch my back, I sketch your back, so we work together. You have a team who works together very well. They have a very good team spirit, but not on the proper, they don't have the proper mindset. Maybe they are not focusing on delivering things. They are just trying to focus on complementing each other and trying to be relaxed. Will it work in a business organization? It might not. But one important fact when it comes to self-organizing teams is actually, if we want to make a system self-organized, one thing is actually you have to have a common goal set to the team, which is visualized to everyone. So that whether they work or not, it will be visualized to everyone. It's not about finding faults for individuals, it's all about visualizing things, visualizing what the team does and the team's outcome. If it's a cricket match, whether the team wins or loses, it's visible, right? But in software development context, it's very difficult to, get that kind of visualization. But still, we try to visualize things as much as possible so that the team knows. That's one thing. The other important fact is, if you take any system, if you want to make that system a self-organized system, we should have a common goal. If the system, the people or the components that belongs to the system have localized goals, the self-organizing concept might not work. Why do you say it's like that? A simple example, a very simple example. Let's say, since we are in Colombo area, let's say if you take town hall, roundabout, Lipton Circle, you have the color lights over there, and then you have the roundabout, and then sometimes you have the policeman controlling traffic as well. I hope you all have gone through that roundabout. And when it's a peak time, what would be the best option that you could have where you will have less amount of traffic? Whether it's when you only have the roundabout only, or whether it's when you have the traffic lights on, or whether there is a policeman, or whether there's none. Try to be frank. Is it when there are policemen? I'm not trying to find faults about the policeman, I'm just trying to elaborate some concept, that's it. When there are color lights working?
Yes.
Okay.
But not all the time.
Not all the time.
I don't specifically know because in the peak time I have.
Okay. Has anyone been there at the peak time? Normally I drive every day passing the junction. Just relate that to any of the junctions that you normally go through, where it has color lights and the policeman sometimes and not. Normally the answer that I get is when there's no one, there's less traffic. Do you agree with me or not? Yes. Yes. Okay. So you agree with me, but you are a bit scared to say yes. Okay. Why is that? Have you ever wondered why? In our junctions, it's very complicated. Right? Even though we have the lanes, do the drivers follow the lane discipline? They don't most of the time. And then you have different people who has different mindsets who try to drive in different angles. But still, it works most of the time. Why? All the drivers has a common goal, not to hit each other and also pass the junction as quickly as possible. Just two common goals. And it works most of the time. But still, there can be conflicts. There can be deadlocks. Sometimes very rarely, there are situations where, none can pass through. Then there has to be an external party who comes in and try to resolve those conflicts. But by the time they resolve the conflict, they have to step aside and let the system organize itself again. Why? Whenever the system is complicated, it's very difficult for a single person or a tool to regulate everything. If the system is very simple, you can always regulate those things. But when the system is becoming more and more complicated, it's very difficult to control. But if you let the system self-organize, most of the time it will work provided that they have a common goal. But if you take the same example, if there is a VIP convoy going during that time, will the traffic be the same? No, right? It will be a standstill. Why? You have a system where people have the common goal, and then you have one particular element in the system which has a localized goal. So whenever you have a localized goal, the system will not work. If you work in a development team, if you are trying to think about only yourself and trying to look at your personal goals, the team will not work in a self-organized manner, because the team members will have different opinions and different localized goals. But as a team, everyone should have a common goal and a common vision to achieve that. Then the system can be self-organized. That's very important. Okay, and then recognition, again, it's the same thing. It's about the team recognition that we talk a lot about. And again, in real life, it's not only about the happy times. There can be always challenging times as well. But still, whenever we have challenging times, it's not about the individuals. It's all about the team. You have to face as a team when it's a good time, and also when it's not a very good time as well. Okay. Then face-to-face communication. I think someone asked about this question. Face-to-face communication. I'll try to explain this with a very simple example. I think with this, I think everyone will understand what it is. Try to read this. Let's assume that this is the specification that you were given from the customer, and read this specification and try to give me the product. Pause. Thank you. What else? Any other different products? Now I'm a customer. This is the specification that I have given to you as software vendor, and now as software vendor, you all have given me a pause. But actually, what I've expected is this one. This was my product that I was expecting. I have given some proof as well, which will maps to these definitions. Now I've been expecting this, and I've got a pause. As a customer, will I be satisfied? Where did it go wrong? Is it you or is it me? It's no one's fault. But we use any language to have a proper communication. But the problem is, if we have a passive communication, what happens is always you might end up in situations like this. If you have a active communication, interactive communication, you can always ask questions, you can always clarify things. And depending on the interaction that we have, interaction level that we have, you can always come up with the proper alignment. If you can remember, I was talking about misalignments. So it's no one's fault. It's about, I'm expecting something, and you will have understood the problem in a different way. If you take the software development context, this is even more complicated. Because certain situations, even the customers does not know what they want. But still they try to elaborate what they want. And it involves technology, it involves people, it involves cultures, different things. So it's very difficult to align those things unless you have the interactive communication. When we use the word face-to-face communication, it's not always about two people sitting on the same room and having interaction. Maybe it's remotely, but we are talking about interactive communication, live communication, maybe through link, maybe through a phone call, maybe through video conferencing, whatever, it should be an interactive communication. Whenever you have interactive communication, you can always clarify things. You can always make sure that both of the parties are on the same page. That's why Agile talks a lot about interactive communication. That's why they say individuals and interactions over processes and tools. This might be a process where you define the spec and where you give your product. Instead, if you would have done it in a different way with interactions, you would have come up with the elephant or someone else. Okay. Did I answer your question? Is it you who raised that question about the individuals and interactions? Right. Communication, I think again I've covered this. And then working software. Again, working software is also very important when it comes to software development. And it's again, doing things in a different way using the same resources. Now, the traditional way again, you have your product, normally what you do is you have the analysis phase, design, implement, and test in short terms. Then you do your development, and what happens is, at different levels, your project manager will come to you and ask you what is the status of your project. Then you will say, 50% of the work is done, or maybe even 90% of the work is done. But for the customer, what's the value that the customer has gained? It's zero. Because you all haven't delivered anything. So even though you all have done with 50%, still you haven't delivered any business value to the customer. Instead, with the same resources, same skills, same people, same time, what you do is you try to do the things in a different way. You turn this around. You turn this around and you pick a small business value, and then for that particular business value, you do your analysis, you do your design, you do your implementing, and then you do your testing. So it's slightly a tricky thing to do, but still what you do is you try to break your entire solution into small features where you try to deliver a business value from each and every feature. And then what happens? After 50% of the work is done, 50% of the work is already delivered to the customer, and whatever which is being delivered is 100% usable for the customer. So it adds a value to the customer. It adds a value to the customer. Again, taking the same example, let's say I want this. Let's assume that I will not accept a person controlling this presentation, so I need a device. And then now, as a electronic engineer, you need to define this. You need to design this device. What would be your approach? Let's say that you have this will have different components. You have a controller for page up, you have a controller for page down, then you have the circuit board, you have your battery power source, and then you have your Bluetooth receiver and the transmitter, and then you have your outer case. So how should you approach for the development of this? What would be the starting point for you? Again, not rocket science, simple things. You don't need to think about the different circuit levels, but just on a very high level. What would be your approach?
Input, output, those kinds of general things that you
Okay, so that means
context, some sort of a context diagram.
Okay, you start off with the context diagram where you design things.
Yes.
Okay, good, thanks. Then what will be your next step? So you start off with the context diagram with the design where you define where the controls are. Okay, then you have the page up and the page down, and then you have the laser pointer, and then power on and off switch, those things. Okay, thank you. Then, any other approach?
I think even with the customer as a presenter, I think it's better if he has laser and some other stuffs. But I think it's better if we can deliver some device which he can slides up down.
Okay, good, thank you. So again, it's a slightly different thing. Like you still need a design through agreed, but still maybe what we try to do is, okay, as a presenter, the most important thing for me to make sure that at least the page up works. But now, if you define, then again, if you look at your circuit, right, you simply can't have a partial circuit board where you have the ICs for the page up button. You need to have the entire circuit board, which is the same size that you are going to use, but you will not have the ICs or the controls for the entire functions. You will only have the controls for the page, which will work for the page up button. And it will need the power source. So you are done with, again, the entire circuit board, but with not all the different ICs, just enough ICs to work the page up button. And then you deliver it to the customer. Maybe you don't even have this casing. You have just a small button with the power source, very ugly looking battery, but still the page up works. And it adds a business value, it's a feature, but will it be ready for production? As a presenter, will I be using it? Yes or no? I might not, right? Because it only works for page up. So there's two terms called adding a business value and a marketable feature. These are two different things. Adding a business value is one, being a marketable feature is another thing. Now, having designed the page up button, it will be a business value for me because it adds a value for me. If you have defined the entire circuit board, which will work, for me it's zero value because circuit board will not help me, even though it's needed. But working software, working controller with the page up button, it adds a business value for me, but still it's not marketable because I need to have the page up and the page down. But by the time I have the page up and the page down button, it might become a marketable feature. Where page up and page down works, I can use it to some extent. Normally we define things like, must have, should have, and could have. Like now page up and page down in this context would be the must haves. Without those two things, I simply can't use it. But then, should have, or rather, should have would be like, maybe the outer casing and the cap for the power source, those are could have. So should have. And then could have would be the fine touches. It depends. Again, if we define your solution in this manner, it might not be the most efficient way. I mean, you design everything first, and then you implement your service code. It will be the most effective way of doing it, efficient way of doing it. But still, for the customer, it might not. And as a customer, if the page up and page down works, I might say, okay, now this is working for me, that's fine. So we'll stop this project at this particular point because this is enough for me right now. But if we have defined the other angle, if we have defined the priorities in the wrong manner, let's say you start off with the laser pointer first. Then the next one would be your power source, power button. Then as a customer, I will still say, no, these two are not enough for me. I need to have the other features as well. And that is the complaint that we always get from the team. What they say is, normally in Agile, what we say is, you have your, there's something called a triangle. Can I use a whiteboard marker? Okay, maybe it's very simple. Just try to virtually have the vision. Now, you have three components. Those are called features, quality, and time. Time, quality, and features in a product. Normally, what Agile says is always the the time and the quality is fixed, and the features would be the variable in any project. Thanks. Normally what we say is quality and the time is fixed in any project, but the features are the variable. And then normally the complaint that we get is, even though this is said like this, when it comes to real world, you say feature 1 is needed, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 are needed. And then it's like, quality and time is fixed, but still you say all the features are also needed. And then it's not practical to do all the features during the time with the certain amount of resources. The actual problem is when you define your priorities on the features, you have to make sure that you define the priorities in the proper way. If you define page up first, page down first, and maybe having the other controls might not be, if you don't have the time, still the product would be useful for the customer. But if you start off with defining the laser pointer and the power switch and the and the outer cover and then the other features, then people might say, okay, features are not varying because even the bottommost prioritized feature is needed by the customer. So prioritizing things is also very important. While identifying the customer's needs or the business needs. Okay, going back here, going to the features. I mean, in practical life also, normally we try to do it like this, not on the other way, isn't it? When you eat a cake, for example, do you eat layer by layer unless you are a child? No, right? You only pick a slice where you get all the flavors and then you eat it, isn't it? So in normal life, we do it in the Agile way, but when you try to do software development, you always try to do it like this. That's where the problem is. It can be software development, it can be anything, but still, you can have the same mindset. I can give you in number of examples, but because of the time, I will not go through that level. Okay, then Agile talks a lot about sustainable development as well. Sustaining in the market. If it's a traditional way of doing things, if you have done in the traditional development, you might have seen this at the beginning of your project. And if you plot a graph, time against workload, at the beginning, it will be like this, isn't it? You'll be relaxed because it's at the beginning of the project. You have ample of time. You can do whatever you want. And in the middle, you start working on something, and now it's some serious work. But what happens is, when you are more towards your end, if you do if you take the same approach, it might happen to you in your vivas as well. Remember that, mind you. And then at the end, you might be like this. You are expected to deliver everything, and everything starts falling, isn't it? Because now you are at the very end of your project. Again, same rule applies for your viva as well in your project. If you take a different approach, and then you might end up like this. And what Agile says is it's the other way around. You start off with you start off with a certain amount of pace, and you always try to make sure that you maintain the same pace, or rather slightly improve the pace. And you will not start with a very relaxed mode. Normally, the example that we normally take is actually Agile is not about running a marathon. So running a sprint, it's all about running a marathon. Where if it's a sprint, you always put your maximum energy and you run for a short period of time, and then you are done. You are burnt out. But in Agile, you start off with a certain pace and you run a very long distance with the same pace. So you are sustainable. Sustainable development is another very important aspect that Agile talks about. If you want to sustain in the industry, then maybe Agile might be the answer. Again, if you want to have a project which will last for a short period and you want to deliver something quite fast, then again, Agile might not be the best answer. Now I'm trying to elaborate different elements, pros and cons. Then, letting a team being self-organized might be a cost, because your project will end within 2 months, and then if you let the team self-organize for 1 month, you are lagging your project time. But if you think about, maybe you need to train a team which will work as a team for 2 years, which needs to be productively delivering things on a sustainable pace, maybe you need to do some groundwork where you let the team self-organize, let them be motivated. So that's a different angle. Okay, and then Agile talks a lot about technical excellence as well. What does technical excellence mean for you? I assume that you will have done some mini projects and done some development. So what does technical excellence mean? It talks about only 3 things: poor quality, poor design, and quick and dirty fixes. Do you know the meaning of quality and poor design? Obviously, I hope you know. And the other question would be quick and dirty fixes. Do you want me to explain that, or it's very clear for you? It's obvious. What does quality means? Coding standards. Okay. Why do you need coding standards for? Maintenance. So the answer would be what? Quality means you need to have a piece of code which can be maintained. Again, trying to give the big picture here, business value. If I'm the customer and if you say, I need 2 more months for the project because I need to have the coding standards, as a customer I will say, bullshit, I don't want that, I just want the product delivered. Right? So you need to get into the customer's shoes and say, look here, I need 1 month more because I need to make sure that your product can be maintained. Then I will say, yes, take your time and then do it. Again, same answer, but still you have to present it in a way where the customer understands. That's very important.
For the business purpose of the customer.
You mean the product that we deliver?
Quality. You said customer has the business purpose, so it should fit the business purpose. So that's
Exactly. Yes, quite true.
Customer is the real judge of the
quality. Exactly. Quite true. Very good. Thank you very much for bringing that point. It's like, again, the word quality is a kind of relative term, and it always boils down to the customer. What the customer defines as quality will be the quality for you. I'll try to take a simple example. Let's say let's say I want to buy a vehicle, a car, let's say. If I am very concerned about using a very posh and brand new car, I will be more concerned about the outer shape, how it looks like, what the painting is, whether it's shining or not, whether it has scratches or not. So as a customer, that would be my expectation. So even though I get a Ferrari with a small scratch, I might not buy it because I will interpret it as of poor quality. Maybe the Ferrari is very good, it only has a scratch, but still I will interpret it as a poor quality. But there can be another customer who is not concerned about the scratches. He's only concerned about the engine performance. Now for that customer, whether you have scratches on the body or not, it doesn't really matter. So the quality, the line should be drawn by the customer when it comes to quality. But there are normally, in theory, there are certain things like non-functional requirements, functional requirements. There are different things, but still, in real life, normally the quality would be defined by the customer itself. We simply can't challenge the customer if the customer comes in and says, this is of poor quality. Then we need to understand why the customer says like that, and then we need to address those problems. And then normally we have a kind of conflict. Now, Agile talks a lot about change, welcoming changes and trying to adapt to the changes that the customer asks for. That means it talks a lot about redefining the design or rather refactoring the design. And we all know when we have a good design and if you try to refactor the design, always it might be of low quality because the design keeps on changing. And on the other hand, Agile talks that Agile needs quality. So how can we achieve that? Isn't it kind of slightly contradictory? We're talking about trying to adapt to customers' expectations and trying to adapt the solution all the time, change solution all the time. And on the other hand, we're talking about the quality. That means, let's say for example, testing. We need to test, once we are done with the solution, we test all the different integrations, it works fine. And the customer comes up with a different change requirement. To change that, then you simply can't test only that. You need to test all the other integrations. So if you keep on doing the same thing, you will end up testing all the time. As an organization, then you will be spending lots of man hours on testing. Because the changes are very rapid, and then you have to make sure that your integrations are working. Isn't it? So how can we achieve that? Automated testing, very good, thank you. So it's all about automation, test automation. And test automation also plays a big role, especially in Agile teams. And again, since I was given this topic a little bit also, I will touch this a little bit. But again, there are different tools in the industry which can be used, and there are different levels of test automation as well. Are you all aware of this pyramid, test pyramid? Have you all seen this? Yes or no? Yes. Good. Then maybe you all can help me out. What are the levels and what does this mean? Can you give at least give some examples for different levels, some tools, concepts?
Analyzing codes, coding standards.
coding standards.
Sonacubes. Unit testing means if a SE develops some component, some class or something, he can use JUnit or like that.
Or something where you can test that particular unit. Good.
Integration testing is meaning it's testing different components is working together.
So it's mainly about integration testing.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
I don't know it's exactly correct or not. I think sometimes Selenium or like that.
Selenium actually comes in on the top level where you talk about UI testing, where you simulate the user interactions normally. But there are different tools like Jenkins, for example. Jenkins comes under test integration. And Sonacube falls in all these levels. It's a kind of a test management tool where you can manage the different levels. And there are different tools like, and UI testing also again, things like coded UI test for Visual Studio, and if it's a web browser, then you can use Selenium. There are different frameworks that you can use as well. But again, the amount of testing that is needed again would differ. Like if you try to automate everything on the UI level, the cost is very high and the probability of failing is very high. So you simply don't automate all the UI interactions with UI testing. No, it's only the critical business flows that you try to simulate on the UI level. But things like static code can be done at any level for all the code. So different levels. And especially if you are developing a product that has to be maintained for a long time, and if you expect that it will have some change requirements coming in, then test automation is important. But if you think it's a one-off product for a single customer, then maybe automating things, again, you need to pick the proper tests, not all the tests. Any other questions that you have? Okay, moving on. Simplicity. Again, Agile talks a lot about simplicity. Now, what happens is, if a customer comes to you and asks for something like this, as very skilled software engineers, we all try to deliver something like this. This is an excellent product which has all the features which are working fine. But again, the problem would be the customer will not need those features. And normally, if you take a process like Lean, whatever the features that are not needed for the customer in Lean, they call it as waste. Or what we are trying to do is actually we are trying to develop waste. I don't know whether you all know this. If you Google again, you can find it. Normally in general terms, if you take any software product, normally what they say is it's only 20% of the features are being used by a customer, and like 10 to 15% are being rarely used, and the rest is never being used. So that means the rest, it adds a maintenance cost, an effort, which is of no value. So it's all about trying to make sure that you keep your things as simple as possible, which can be used by the customer. And there's a very fine saying. This guy Antonio says is actually a designer knows he has achieved perfection not when there is nothing left to add. There's something to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. So you always make sure that whatever you develop is being used by the customer. That's where you should focus on first. It's all about trying to make sure that keeping things simple and make sure that the most important things are delivered to the customer. Okay, self-organizing teams, I think I've touched that under motivators, so I will not talk about self-organizing teams here. And then the final one is actually becoming more effective, or rather inspect and adapt. Normally, we have a term called retrospective meetings. I hope you all have heard about that term. So it's about, you are trying to inspect and adapt. Why do we need to adapt? Adapt for? Without adapting, we can't survive. Good, very good. Thank you. It's like, the classic example, the simple example would be if you take different species. If I ask you a question, is it the weakest who has survived over time? The answer would be obviously no. But if I ask you a question, is it the strongest who has survived over time? Again, the answer is it might not. But if I ask you who has survived over time, then it's the most adaptive species who has survived over time. And on the other hand, Agile talks a lot about sustainable development. To sustain, you need to survive. To survive, you have to be adaptive. The other very fascinating fact about these different principles are actually all these principles are very tightly interconnected. If you are not doing good on one principle, the reflection might come on the other principles. So each and every principle has a very tight connection. For example, here, if you are not adapting, you will not be able to sustain. Agile talks about being sustainable, and Agile talks about trying to be adaptive as well. Adapting means, again, it's about continuously improving. Okay, one last slide before we take a small break. Trying to recap everything what I have talked so far. We have these different core values and the principles, and Agile itself is actually, maybe you might have understood this, itself is not a development process. It's more like a mindset, where it's an umbrella, and whatever the development processes which has those four core values and the 12 different principles, we can label them as Agile development methodology.
If you use the word agile itself, it's not a development process. It's more like a mindset. If I go back to what I started. Okay, with that said, maybe that's the end of the agile part. Do you have any other questions? Yes.
So that in the slide you rotate the
Development.
development
Yeah.
process. I have some problem. What is the difference between spiral development, traditional development that called spiral
Yeah.
development, and agile
Okay.
development?
Very good. Thank you for asking that question. The question would be, what is the difference between the spiral development model and the agile? There are so many differences. Like for example, if you take, I said agile is more like a mindset. So it's like there are different key elements that comes in with the mindset. Like for example, motivated individuals, self-organizing teams, trying to visualize what we are going to do for everyone. So those kind of things does not come under, whether it's spiral or whether it's prototyping, it doesn't come under that. The other common question would be, if you take something like prototyping and agile, whether it's, or the Scrum, whether it's the same or not. Prototyping also, you try to get the feedback, but there are so many other elements that comes into play. And those are kind of, we call them as, soft processes. Like, now if you take the other software, most of the other software development processes, all of those processes comes under a general title called defined process control mechanisms, where you try to define all the steps. But when it comes to things like Scrum and Kanban, they all fall under something called, empirical process control mechanisms, where you can't define the steps. Why? The context that we work on. And we simply can't define what needs to be done next, unless we have done it. If we have done it before, we don't need to redevelop that again. So that's the difference in software development. We simply can't, define the steps that needs to follow. So if you take spiral, for example, you always try to define the steps, which you can't in software development. So that's the main difference. Any other questions?
In the context of the Sri Lankan IT industry, what do you think about the usage of the UML diagrams in Agile?
UML diagrams is actually a tool. For example, the company that I work for, we use UML a lot. And we start off with the modeling, and once we model it, the basic structures of the codes are being generated. So UML is a concept or a tool that we can use, whether we do it in the waterfall way or whether we do it in the agile way. So it's agile comes in a more like on a high level where you have the mindset, but you can have different tools which can be used to do the thing that you do.
There is certain particular UML diagram that you are using.
Yeah, it's not all, and it's not according to the book itself. We have our own tool which we have developed where we can model things and then it generates codes. And we have sometimes our different interpretations, and also we have our different meanings as well.
For example, use case diagrams, those kind of things you may
Use case diagrams also we are using, but now it's not that. It's because what we do is we use a tool called Jira, where we can have something called user stories. I will touch on user stories a little bit later. So where on a user story we try to define that what we need, and then even though we don't have a use case diagram, if you pick a user story, it will elaborate what the interactions that the user wants. So we use that as a tool to make sure that we get the visual evidence. And at the end, we use use case diagrams to view or rather get the understanding of what the customer needs. So whether it's again, whether it's a process and tool or an interaction, that's what we need to be concerned about.
The reason I asked this question is the international sort of domain, there has been rather differing views about whether the user stories, whether they can map to use case or whether there is connection between, and some people are saying there are no connection, are saying there is a connection, so that's why
Okay. Well, maybe my take on that would be, I don't think use cases and user stories has a one-to-one mapping. I would say no. Because use case, in simple terms, use case would be something that is more like a static thing, where you define what you want and then that's it. But on the other hand, if it's a user story, it would be something which will evolve right throughout. Even though when it's done, it might be reopened again and maybe certain requirements would have been changed. So it's a dynamic thing that we are talking about.
again interactions and a static team. So at least in my opinion, I think it doesn't have one-to-one mapping. But there are some similarities, but still it's not a one-to-one mapping, I would say.
So how about documentation side of agile process?
Documentation.
Yeah, we use waterfall and something. We have clear boundaries in this system. We deliver SRS and design specification. But in the agile process, we don't talk about that documentation part or other thing more highly. So that there is some risks about middle of the project or some employee turnover or something. What we take when that situation.
Okay. To answer your question, actually, I mean, again, going back, Agile is not about not having documentation. That's one thing that we have to be clear of. But on the other hand, if I, shoot you back with another question, I mean, in the industry, normally we always shoot that question. If you have a specification written at the beginning of your project, once your project is done, how accurate would that specification be? 90% of the time, people would say it's not accurate. What is there in the spec and what is there being implemented, there are two different things. You always get that complaint simply because even though you do it in the waterfall way, still you do some changes. And when you do it at the very end of the project, where you have this, stressful ending, you are not bothered about updating documentation, or you are not bothered about documenting what the decisions that you all have taken. You are only bothered about delivering things at that point. Then what you have delivered is one, and what you have documented is another two things. So you always have that clash. But what Agile says is, whatever which is good for you, use that as a tool to make sure that you evolve things. But at the end, when you, there's another keyword called the definition of done. I will again touch that when I talk about Scrum. When you are done with a feature, you have to make sure that if it needs documentation, it has to be there. That means if the documentation is not there, that means the feature is not done, not completed. So then you have alignment where whenever you deliver something, you have the documentation which is up to date. And for example, again, you can use different tools like, for example, maybe like Jira. Again, you always log your interactions, and at the end, you can even export whatever you have as the user story to a document. Then you have the latest version. You can add comments, you can add anything, even videos. So then you have the latest version of it. I mean, if it's a co-located team, you don't need to have Jira. I mean, you can have a co-located board or whatever. I mean, whatever which is feasible for you, use it. That's what Agile says. But you have to make sure that when you say it's done, if it needs documentation, it has to be done.
There can also be a situation where the customer specifically asks for documentation.
Exactly. Now, let's say, for example, if I'm totally new for this, if I don't know about page up and page down and getting the sync between the transmitter and the receiver, I will need a help, a manual to use this. So when you deliver this with all the features without the manual, I will say this is zero value for me because I don't know how to use it. Again, trying to get into the customer's shoes. Okay, thank you. Any other comments that you have? Okay, now it's 9:40. How long do you need for a break? Again, this presentation is, I'm trying to do it in the Agile way. I can again, since some of you all have been in Scrum teams and have some kind of experience on Scrum teams, maybe you all can have more questions. And please feel free to shoot those questions as well. And if you are kind of a little bit new to Scrum, that's again perfectly fine. I will touch the basic concepts. Again, I will not go into deeper details. Again, if you take Scrum, for example, you can talk about Scrum for 30 minutes, you can talk about Scrum for 1 hour, you can talk about Scrum for 2 days. I mean, there are different, contexts, different angles that you can talk. Because of the time, again, I will just touch on the surface level. But again, if you have detailed questions, always try to ask those questions and I will try to explain depending on the time constraints that I have. Right. Then, since some of you told that you all have been working in Scrum teams, then I can again start with a very simple question. What are we going to achieve with Scrum? We have to follow a process again. We know that now, I think we all know that a process would be something that would help us to do things in a better way. Okay, and if you talk about Scrum, what will be the ultimate goal of Scrum? There's a kind of very specific saying in Scrum about that. Normally it says, the ultimate goal of Scrum is actually to deliver the highest business value within the shortest period of time. So that's what Scrum try to achieve with different elements. It's all about trying to achieve the highest business value during the shortest period of time. That's the ultimate goal of Scrum. And if you ask the question, how are we going to achieve this? I mean, there are different components or different elements that comes into play which will fit with each other. And normally Scrum focuses on, there are 3 different characteristics that Scrum talks about. Normally it talks about, focusing on iterative development or rather short feedback loops, so that you can always, on a regular basis inspect and adapt. And then you embrace changes all the time, where you always try to welcome change rather than a hindrance. So that it's simply because if a customer asks for a change, we have the impression that he or she will only ask for that. It's because there is an actual need for it. So Scrum always welcomes changes, but again, having said that, change adds some overhead. It comes with a cost. That's true, but still you always try to embrace that, and then you always try to achieve or get the highest business value during the shortest period of time. So that's the different characteristics that Scrum has. And I think I've touched this a little bit. Scrum falls under something called empirical process control mechanisms, where you simply can't define each and every step, but it's like, it's more like, again, having a mindset and, a thinking. And for this particular empirical process control mechanism, normally Scrum talks about these 3 different pillars: transparency, inspection, and adaptation. What does these 3 mean? Normally what Scrum says is, in order to have a better process, you always have to have all these 3 pillars intact. If you are failing with one pillar, the entire system will collapse. You can remember, I've mentioned earlier also, it's like, each and every different component has a very tighter interconnection between each other. So if one fails, the entire system collapses. It's not about only one particular person will collapse. It's the entire system that collapses. Same goes with Scrum. You have the inspection and adaptation, but to inspect and adapt, you have to have transparency. Simple example. I don't know whether it worked or not. I've asked you a little while ago whether you need a break. And you said yes. Then I've asked you, why do you need a break? If you are sleepy, but you are not, willing to be transparent, you would have said, sir, we are hungry, we need some break. But the actual reason would be not hungry, being sleepy. And I've inspected and adapted. Okay, I gave you a break for 15 minutes so that you all can go out and eat and come. But still, you fall asleep after 15 minutes of time. So I have inspected and adapted, but the result will be, again, of no use. But if it was sleepy, if it was boring, you would have said, this is a bit boring. You don't need to speak about these topics. We already know about these topics. Then you have been transparent. I have to have the professionalism to accept that comment, and I should be willing to adapt. We call it adapting accordingly. It's not about trying to adapt all the time. Even if you adapt, and if it doesn't adapt in the proper way, it will not work. And because of that, this transparency element has a very big role in Scrum. You have to be transparent. If not, whatever you try to do, whatever changes that you try to do, will result a fail. And when it comes to transparency, it comes in with some values, and in Scrum also it talks about some values, and defines some set of values as well. One such value is called openness. You have to be open. And what will happen if you are not open enough? If you are not open enough, you will not get into the heart of the issue. Simple example, break example. If you are not trying to address the heart of the issue, then the result would be of no use. You have to be open. And then the other value is courage.
you have to have the courage to achieve your or the team's goals. If not, what will happen? I mean, definitely, in the business environment, do you think that you can expect a kind of a smoother way of doing things? You might not. Why? In any business organization, the focus would be to gain profits. If we don't get profits, we simply can't survive. Then we need to lay off people, we need to cut down business. So it's all about making profits. To earn profits, what do we need to do? We need to get the maximum utilization of the resources that we have. It can be people, it can be knowledge, it can be skills, it can be technology, whatever the resource that we have, and then get the maximum through. To do that, we will always face a challenge where we are lacking resources. It's not that we will have unlimited resources all the time. Every time we will be limited with resources. You will be challenged with time. You will be challenged with technologies. You will be challenged with your skills. That's how it is. It's simply because if we are to gain a business edge, there has to be a difference between the operational cost and the revenue that we get. So because of that, we always have the challenges. So if we are to overcome those challenges, people should have that mindset of being courageous. If not, it will not work. Because normally, sometimes, some perceptions that some students has is actually, certain organizations are they have the environments which are relaxing environments. But in reality, in any business organization, there's no such organization called relaxed environment. It can be a friendly and, supportive environment. It can be a friendly and fun environment. It can be. But you will not be able to find any business organization which is relaxing. Because if it's relaxing, then it will not be a business. It will not be a business because you simply can't get the people to relax in a business. So that means you have to have that mindset to be courageous on whatever you do. And then the third one is respect. If the people are open enough to give feedback, on the other hand, the receiver should have the respect for those feedback as well. If you don't respect those feedback, again it will not work. So that is also very important. Without respect, your team won't present criticism in a constructive way. It's all about constructive criticism. And then commitment. You have to be committed to whatever you are going to do. Whether it's your sprint goal, whether it's achieving your common goal, you have to be committed. If not, things will not work. Again, the other most important fact on Scrum is actually about focus. Focus means whatever you do, you have to have the focus on the things that you do. And that is one of the reasons why normally we say if you take a sprint, for example, you always try to look at the sprint goal and the team will only try to work to that particular goal. So it's about making sure that you focus on whatever the things that you do at that particular point of time. And maybe I will try to touch focus a little bit on also in the future, in the rest of the slides as well, whenever there are some examples, of course. Without focus, again, your team won't be able to implement change. That is very important as well. Okay. Again, something that I have touched a little bit, so I'll try to briefly run through this. If you look at the waterfall cake, again, what happens is, you will, if you take any project, you will have a time box where you need to deliver the project. And then what happens is you have the requirements piece, and then you have the design piece, and you have the development and the testing piece. And what you do is to start your development. Then, this is what you will be expecting after the end of your product or the project. What happens is you start off with your requirements, then you do your design, and then you don't have enough time for the development, so it's cut down. And then what happens is for testing, it's even furthermore cut down. And then what happens is you have a product which is very well identify the problems and maybe a good design, but maybe partial development is done and maybe even lesser testing is done. Then what happens is you will end up with a product like this, where it's a kind of a not so good product. And then what happens is again you try to do it in a different way. You take the Agile approach where you focus on short feedback loops, and then you have the time, and what you do is you slice your solution into features, as I mentioned earlier. Each and every feature will have its own requirements and design and development and testing phase. So once the feature is done, even the testing, including documentation, is done. And then you have been developing different features, and this would be what you will be expecting at the end of, again, this particular project as well. But again, in reality, what happens is, you start off with your first feature, you are done with it. Second feature done. Third feature done. What happens is, when you start off with the last feature, you don't have enough time. So it's not done. But what happens is, the first 3 features would be the most important features for the customer. So what happens is, ultimately, you will have a product which looks like a product, which can be used by the customer, but maybe smaller on the size that you have expected. So this is what you have. The ideal product would be, but this is what your final solution would look like. But still, it would be a product which is of a business value, and most probably it would be a marketable feature where it can be used in a real production environment. So again, same resources, same skills, same time, everything is the same. The only difference was how we did things. That was the change. That was the only change that we did. Same resources, same skills, everything is the same. Only the approach has changed. Okay, and if I try to, since you all are kind of familiar with Scrum, I will just try to sum up everything into one particular image. In Scrum, you have a person called product owner, and normal product owner would be the person who will define what is needed from the team, and he or she will take input from the end users, customers, team, and other stakeholders, and then he will come up with something called a product backlog. And these different items are called PBIs, or we call them as product backlog items. And each product backlog item will have a business value. And the product owner is the person who will be responsible for defining the business value, and also who would be responsible for prioritizing those product backlog items. Yes. No, that person would be outside the development team. He does not stay with the team.
Maybe a client, client.
It can be a client. It can even be an employee on the same organization who's sitting outside the team. That particular person's responsibility would be for the team to give what is needed from the team, to define what part, not how. It's all about defining the what part. And here, it says input from end users, customers, and it says team. Team is the development team. And why does a product owner needs to take input from the team? Why is that?
The team will know their own skills, how own capabilities, because if they don't have those capabilities, then how are they going to deliver the product?
Okay, thank you for that answer. But I will not agree with that answer in this context. Yeah, team, obviously, yes, a team will have a different set of skills, and the team will know about those skills. And will that have an impact for the decisions that the product owner will take? It can have, but in a slightly different way. What's that difference? Again, try to get into the shoes of the customer.
Customer says some, it is three elements. Customer says, first I need A, then I need B, and I need C. As a developer, in his perspective, if he going to develop a component, sometimes it is needed to develop B component. Then B will be the first output, and then A will be the second output.
So thank you. It's like, you can have dependencies on the different features which the customers might not see. So then, the product owner might need to get that input from the team, so that he can bring that to the customer, saying that, okay, see, even though you have prioritized A, to do A, we need to do B and C. If not,
It's like the something of various software modules say, you have C, you must have A and B.
yes,
Otherwise
true.
you can't
True.
have
But then again, that's the whole idea. But again, it also has two sides. Now, there can be a situation where the team has designed the solution in such a way that it creates dependencies between A, B, C. Then that's not healthy. But there can be situations where there's no way that you could develop A without having B and C. That's a different story. So in a situation where the team has done the design incorrectly, then of course it's a different story. If not, if there are actual dependencies, then take that input, yes, that's one thing. And the other thing is actually when it comes to the development time and effort, you are talking about the skills. In the customer's angle, for the customer, whether the team is skillful or not, it doesn't have an impact. But what the customer has the impact would be, you have team X which will be doing your project, and if you want feature B, in order for the team A to do feature B, it takes 6 weeks. Simply because it has a learning curve, the team members, they don't have the skills. So that is the input that the product owner should get from the team. Okay, now we need to develop this particular feature. Are you skilled enough? If they say no, that doesn't mean that that particular feature will not be given to the team. No. Still, it might be given to the team. The team should have the willingness to learn that and then deliver it. But it adds a cost. It adds a cost. The cost would be the time. Then the customer might say, okay, now to deliver feature A, it takes 6 weeks. To deliver feature B, it takes 2 weeks. Do you still need feature A with high priority? Then the customer might say, no. Okay, if that is the case, maybe feature B would be the highest priority one. You can develop B first and then look at A later, depending on the time. So that's why the product owner takes input from the team. It's not because that whether the team can do it or not. Because in software development context, if you are not skilled enough, you simply can't say as software engineer, I can't do it. I mean, still you are, anyway the technology will be changing. You have to have the willingness to learn. That would be there forever. But then it adds some training time, learning time, experience time. That's acceptable. And then what happens is you have the development team, and in Scrum you don't define team members with different roles like SCs, BSS and something like that. Instead what Scrum says is, whatever the skill that you have, you call that particular individual as a development team member because you contribute to the team in some way. Because of that, normally Scrum does not talk about different roles, even though there are different roles. Scrum talk about development team members. And what the team should do would be, they do different activities. One such activity would be called sprint planning. Sprint planning is something that they can decide now, depending on the priorities, they can decide how much items that they can take for a short iterative cycle or incremental cycle. We call it as a sprint. But again, the decision would be how much. It's not about what to take. What to take would be defined by the product owner. So let's say if the team decides to pick 1, 2 and 5 here, it's not acceptable. Because this is the priority. Team has to pick at least 1, 2, 3 here or maybe 1, 2, that's it. They simply shouldn't be taking something which is of low priority. Team's responsibility would be to decide how much. It's not what, how much to take. And then team would be the people who will be decide how to do things. It's all about how. It's not about what. It's all about how. And then the team will create something called a sprint backlog, where those are the items, backlog items that they will work during a short feedback loop, where they can maintain their focus on what they do. So you have a bigger backlog, but still you have a sprint backlog where the team will focus on that particular sprint and item that belongs to the particular sprint. And then they work on the short feedback loop. It can be from 4 weeks to, it can either be 1 week as well. Normally Scrum now suggests for 1 week sprints. That's the best. That's what they say. But again, it depends on the context, it depends on the teams and your solution and different aspects. But still they work on a short feedback loop. And during this sprint cycle, the sprint backlog should remain as it is. There shouldn't be any changes happening to the sprint backlog. Whereas on the product backlog, it can be evolving all the time. That's perfectly fine. But if the team has picked some items for the sprint backlog, it should be locked. It's simply because, again, to focus the team on the things that they are going to do. Because if the requirements are changing during the sprint, they simply can't focus. And then there are there's a particular role called Scrum Master. Again, Scrum Master would be something sitting together with the team. A Scrum Master would be a facilitator where he or she will help the team to again focus on what they do and to deliver on what they are expected to deliver. So Scrum Master role would be a kind of a facilitator role where that particular individual will help out the team to whatever the work that they do. Like for example, I mean, a simple context again. Now let's say we work on a sprint where I have 2-hour cycle where I try to talk with you, and if someone outside your batch comes in, Isuru might go to the door and say, why? So Isuru is protecting me and the team on our focus. If that person comes in, excuse and asks a question from me, the entire development stops and I have to answer. Instead, the Scrum Master would be a person who's sitting at the side and trying to make sure that the team works to their maximum velocity, in simple terms. And then you have another ceremony called daily Scrum meeting, where the team have this, normally this is called as a stand-up meeting as well, where the team gets together every day and try to synchronize the work that they do, because again, they have to have the common goal and they should be working as a team. If we are to work as a team, we have to have the interactions. Now again, I am trying to map the different words that I have used earlier. If they don't have the interactions, they simply can't work as a team. To work as a team, they need to have a common goal. This is the goal that they are going to achieve. They have to work as a team. To do that, they need to have interactions. Can you see the connections, different connections on different elements? And then there's another meeting called product backlog grooming meeting. This is a kind of optional meeting where, if you look at the entire bigger picture, where, when you come to the planning meeting, you have to have a proper, we call them as a groom backlog, where, the requirements are clear. So if it's not clear, you can always, during the sprint, also forecast on the upcoming sprints and try to help out the product owner to groom this backlog. Simply because if the product owner wants some input from the team, he or she can take it within the product backlog grooming meetings, where they try to groom the backlog, which should be taking in during the coming sprints. And then, at the end of the sprint, there should be something which is given. It should be, we call it as a potentially shippable product. That means it should be a product that can be used in the customer's production environment. So it should add some business value. And once the sprint is finished, normally there are 2 different ceremonies. One ceremony is called the sprint review, and the other ceremony is called sprint retrospective. Sprint review, another term that people use in the industry, is called the demonstration or sprint demo or iteration demo. There are different terms that people use, but again, it's about you have you have a product now here. So what you do is you critically review the product that you deliver. So that's where the sprint review comes into play, where you review your product and you always inspect and adapt the solution that you give. And then the retrospective, it's about the process. You review your process. From the sprint review, you review your product. From the retrospective, you review your process. The process that you use to build the product. So the process will keep on improving all the time. The product will keep on improving all the time. Again, connecting to inspect and adapt. The 12th principle in Agile. Bigger sprint cycle, what happens is, even though we say that we work in a Scrum way, we tend to go into the waterfall way, where you have a 2-month sprint cycle, where during the sprint you do your analysis, you do your design, you do your implementation testing, which is not the way to go forward. And there is also another kind of a bad practice that some teams does, like they work in the Scrum way or the Agile way, but during a sprint they always try to work on the waterfall way, which is not the case. Even during the sprint also, they should be thinking in terms of the Agile way of thinking, always trying to deliver a business value. Any questions? And then after each sprint, again, the team should deliver a potentially shippable product that can be used in production by the customer. And then there's something called definition of done. What does that mean? Now this particular part touches a little bit about documentation as well. Now when a team says we are done with a feature, it should be in line with what the customer expects. Now again, if the team is only thinking in a different way, what happens is there can again be kind of misalignments. A simple example would be, let's say, a practical example again.
at my house, I think it was last year, during, again, April New Year, normally we do the paintings and stuff. And again, limited constraints. Now, I need to do some painting in my house, which needs to be done by me, which I'm not skillful. And also, I wanted to, preserve my, leaves, so that it has to happen during the weekends, where I have some other work to do as well. Again, now there are different constraints. I mean, if I have enough leave, I would have put annual leave, and then I would have done then unlimited resources. I don't need a process for. So what I did was, okay, during the weekend I need to do it, and if I try to do it in the waterfall way, what happens? Now I have this room. I start off with cutting, removing all the furniture outside. So one session is gone. Then I start cutting the walls. Weekend is finished. Now until the next weekend, all the furniture would be outside the room, and my wife will be, will be pissed off with me. And when I start the work the week after, there will be, dirt on the walls again, back again, right? Isn't it? So it will not work. So what I did was actually, I picked the room, one particular room, and then I picked the priorities. Okay, now if you take this particular room, if there are more items on the closer to the wall, then maybe that's not the best option to pick first. What will be the most visible wall? Okay, I'll try to finish that particular wall. And again, you simply paint this part, right? It's not practical. You have to have the enough design. So I just picked one wall which is most visible. So I just cut that part, right? Wipe it and then apply paint. So at the end of 1 week, all the furniture were moved within the same room to one side, and one wall was done. It's done. So then, after 2-3 weeks, everything was done. The room was painted. Then, one day I told my wife, okay, look here, I have done this particular work. My wife said, no, you are not done. You are not finished with that. I said, why? Now it's finished. Now it's a very good product. All the walls are it looks nice. So why? Then what she said was, even though you are finished with it, look at your, paint brushes and paint baskets. All are lying on the garage. So if you are done, you have to keep them inside the cupboard so that it's clean. So the expectation of my wife when it's done is actually you have to finish it, and you have to make sure that all the other stuff are being clean. But for me, what was done is actually when the walls are finished, I'm done. Now, as a software engineer, if it works on my machine, I'm done. Right? When it is integrated, it doesn't work. The most common answer would be, no, it should work because it worked on my machine, isn't it? It's the common answer. Same thing. When you say it's done, everyone should have a common understanding. When this particular feature is done, that means, okay, you have to implement it, you have to test it, you have to make sure that the help documentation is available. Then as a customer, I can use it. But there can be situations, okay, the customer is, is a skilled customer, he or she doesn't need the help documentation. In that case, yes, documentation is not done when it's done. Again, it depends on the context. But what is important is every stakeholder has to have a common understanding. Again, common vision. When an item is done, it should be done. So that's why this definition of done comes in. This is again a keyword that is used in Scrum. And then I think this is also I touched. Now, in Scrum, you always inspect and adapt two things. It's the product that you develop, and it's the process that you use to develop the product. So you always inspect and adapt the product and the process. Both are important. Okay, and this is the final slide on the basic principle. It's like, now in Scrum there are clear separation of concerns. You have the product owner, the development team, and Scrum Master. Those are three different roles that every Scrum team has. And the product owner's focus would be what to build, and the responsibility would be ROI. When it comes to development team, again, how to deliver, and delivery and quality. And the Scrum Master, how to work together and the process. It's more about the facilitating the team, including the product owner. Okay, then I have a small section on the development team, which I will try to answer your question. Any other questions that you have on Scrum? No more questions. Right. Again, some different elements. Now, if you take a development team, normally what Scrum suggests is actually if it's a Scrum team,
the composition should be, 7 plus or minus 2. That's what Scrum says. So that means it should be between 5 to 9. Can you tell me why Scrum says like that? If you give a definition, there should be a reason for it. Who has worked on Scrum teams? Do you know why normal Scrum says the composition would be between 5 to 9?
Should be big enough that you have sufficient people of different
Carry some tasks, yes.
But again, if it's too much, then communication and administration, that kind of thing will take.
Yeah, so quite good. It's like, if it's more than 9, then if it's a larger set of people, there would be communication overhead that comes in, which will hinder your interactions and individuals. On the other hand, if you have few team members, the team gets too sensitive. Let's say if it's a 4-member team, if one person takes leave, that means you are working on 75% of your capacity for that day. So it's quite a lot. Okay, what else? The other point is actually when it comes to the size. Again, it comes in with the psychology a little bit. I mean, if you take any environment, what normal psychology says is actually if the number of team members are more than 9, it tends to have subgroupings in the system. Maybe you can apply this to any context that you have, whether if you have gone on a trip. If the number of participants were less than 9 or equal to 9, normally the entire set of people will work together as one team. But normally if it's more than 9, there might be some subgroups forming within the team, which is not so good in some channels. That is another reason why Scrum does not promote larger team members, because then there is always a probability where you can have subgroups formed. And a team should be self-organized. I think I've touched self-organizing a lot, so I will not touch on that. And then they are responsible for forecasting on things that they should deliver. And then they should be responsible for developing the product, of course, obviously, because the product development, the responsibility lies on the team itself. And then we call them as, they should be accountable for each other. And that's one of the reasons why this daily stand-up meeting comes into play. One reason being they need to synchronize with each other. And on the other hand, since they are accountable for each other, I should be accountable for my team member on what I do. So if I'm a free rider on the team, on the stand-up I would have nothing to say. So if I'm accountable for my team members, I have to make sure that I have my commitment. I deliver something, and then I can always talk about those things during the stand-up meeting. So that is also important, because the team should organize itself and they should behave themselves. To do that, each and every team member should have that accountability. And then the other term that I wanted to touch, another term that says is actually a team should be cross-functional. What does that mean? Normally, Scrum talks about cross-functional teams. What does cross-functional mean? Team has different people from good. I mean, a simple example. If you have something like this, where you have a 3-course meal, where you have a soup and some salads and some meat items to be eaten, right? You have to have a team like this. It's not that each and every member should have the capability to burn each and every item. It's not that. But as a team, you should be able to burn the entire batch. If you don't have that skill, then we call them as the team is not cross-functional. So it's not that each and every member can have their own specialization. That's perfectly fine. But as a team, they should be able to cater what is being given to them. If they simply can't cater, then the team is not cross-functional. There can be a technical writer, there can be software engineer, there can be a tester. That's perfectly fine, but all those elements has to be there for a team to be cross-functional.
if I take my team at my house, my wife and myself and the little ones, we should be cross-functional. We should be able to cook. We should be able to prepare some simple things like plumbing and stuff like that. But maybe cooking and cleaning, my wife would be the best person. Technical stuff, I might be the best person. But still, as a team, we should be able to do whatever which comes on our way. Being cross-functional. And on the same line, there's another term called generalizing specialists. So we call them as T-shaped team members. What does that mean? So it's a slightly different thing. So it's like, it's something like this. Again, this is a mindset that we should have. It's like, even though you are specialized on some area, there can be certain situations where you need to go outside your specialization area and work depending on the team's expectation. So that means, even though you are a SC who are very good at coding, but you are at the very end of your sprint and you are left with some testing, then you should have the mindset that you should be helping the tester to make sure that testing is done. So in that aspect, it might again not be the most efficient way of doing things, but still at that point of time, it will be the most effective thing of doing. Because if the testing is not done, that means our item is not finished. That means the customer will not have a value. So it's about having that mindset. It's not about everyone should be skillful enough for each and everything. No, it's not practical in life. You can have a Java expert on the team, you can have a .NET expert, that's fine. If it's a .NET item that has come in, if the .NET guy simply can't work on all the items, Java guy should also come in and help them. He has to have that mindset. So you have your expert area like this, and then you should be T-shaped enough where you have your other non-expert areas as well, and you should be willing to help on those dimensions as well. That's what the T-shaped team members mean. So, going back again, cross-functional teams is one thing. Generalizing specialists or T-shaped team members is again a different thing. Did I answer your question, or do you have any other questions?
Because actually I want to know now if, say, the main programming guy,
Okay.
he or she falls sick or leaves the company, and who is going to do that? Someone else will have to adapt that role.
True. The thing is, there is a little bit tricky situation when it comes to the software engineers or the programming guy, because normally the software engineering or the programming skill is not something that you can, get overnight. So normally, when we, compose Scrum teams, normally you don't have just one software engineer or one programming guy in the team. Normally you have at least 2-3 programming guys and at least one or two testers. So if one leaves, still you are left with some technical guys who can, continue the work.
Actually, my example is that, example of the .NET and the Java person
Yeah.
is more relevant.
Okay, right. So that means different skills.
Java person leaves the company, then the .NET person can adapt, or C# person.
The reason is actually, in Scrum, again, you are focusing on single team, single project context. So in that case, if the team is working for a long time, they will be working on Java project for 6 months, and they will be shifting for .NET project for the next 6 months. So if they want to work as a team, they should be willing to learn the other technologies as well. And the third project that they would get might not be the Java or C#, it might be something different. So they have to have that willingness. So in that case, again, team composition plays a role as well. That's where this cross-functionality comes in again. If you don't compose a team where the team is cross-functional, then again there is an overhead for the team where they need to learn. Again, which would be a cost in the business. There can be situations where if you don't have skilled enough people, then again you need to do some recruitments. And also there can be, it's obvious that you can have turnovers as well. So that's normal as well. But that has to be catered as well. Then there can be ups and downs as well. That's why the team needs to inspect and adapt all the time. Let's say you have your process defined, you are working quite smoothly, and all of a sudden your .NET guy leaves. Then you need to inspect and adapt your process. Because now the way you used to work will not work the best way. Then you have to have your own, plan on the process itself. So it's all about, continuously improving process. That's simply because, the nature of business. This turnover is something that is common. expectation of different technologies is again something that is common. Changing business requirements is again something that is common. So the surroundings are changing all the time. Any other questions at this?
So when we define this sprint backlog, we should assign some members to do this task.
Not at the sprint backlog level. It's like this. If I here, what happens is when the sprint backlog is defined by the team, it would be the decision of the team who should do what. So, I mean, when the sprint backlog is defined, that means the team will be focusing, okay, as a team, these are the items that we could do during this timeline. And who's doing what would be something that the team would decide. And normally what happens is, normally this product backlog item would be turned into something called a user story, where it explains a business value. And a user story would be broken down into something called tasks. So tasks would be an item that would be done by a team member. It can be a technical task, it can be a design task, it can be a testing task, it can be a documentation task, it can be anything. But a task itself will not add a business value. It will only be something that would represent something that can be done by a team member. But a user story or a product backlog item would represent an actual business value. Is it clear to you or still not confused?
No, my question is, I'm a developer of the sprint team.
Okay.
When some step is from master or someone to give me a task, specific task, you should implement this function.
No, the answer would be no. The reason is we are talking about self-organized teams. So self-organized teams means a team member should step in at that particular point of time and say, okay, look here, this particular task, I am skilled on this particular thing, so maybe I can do it in a better way. And someone else might say, okay, no, I also can do it. So it's a matter of deciding and do it, but it's not about someone else trying to point out, okay, you have to do this, you have to do that. So it's again trying to micromanage. If you're talking about self-organized teams, that should be happening. Now, maybe a simple example, I don't know whether it will be practical for you all or not. I don't know whether it happens. I mean, how many of you have played cricket during interval at the school? Sorry, I'm taking some examples which relates to me, but girls, at least maybe you can at least visualize things, right? Now, in the interval, you have like 20 minutes, hopefully, and you have to be in the class by after 20 minutes. And you have different people with different skills, right? You have different people with different skills. If there is a person during the interval who's saying, okay, now you have to bowl, you have to bite, you have to field at this point, are you happy with it? Are you happy? No. What will happen? Either next day you will not go, either you will make sure that that particular person will not come for the session, right? Isn't it? Isn't it?
It will take 5 minutes to organize that.
Exactly. It will take 5 minutes to organize that. It's because the constraints are so high. What happens is, whoever who gets a ball, go and start to bowl. Someone take a bat or whatever and then start to bat. Somehow everyone get a chance to play. Within 20 minutes, everyone gets a chance to bat. And whether there's a decision or not, you just tease each other out and crack some jokes, and then you go to class, right? That's how it happens, isn't it? So same rule applies. Same rule applies in the development team as well. If there's someone started saying something, the others will just back off and they will not self-organize. They will wait till that particular person says what to do. Especially in countries like Sri Lanka and India, the Asian countries, our tendency is that. Our tendency is that. Normally people don't challenge the presenter or they don't challenge the architect. It has to happen. It can be right, it can be wrong, that's perfectly fine. It's a matter of bringing those things up. So people have to have that mindset, it's very, very important. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, after one sprint, there should be some product to use used for customer. My question is, there is only 4 weeks. Then in that period, the team should design that, then develop it and test it. In one sprint, we can develop one feature, one product. Another next sprint, we develop another product. How we know how integrate those components? I mean, isn't there any high-level design or something?
Okay, good. Thanks for that question. Again, I think I made a mistake using the word when I use the word product. This is called potentially shippable increment. So it's like, I mean, this is something that you have delivered, a feature that can be used, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this is something that can be used by the customer in their business right away. Because they might need to have different set of business features bundled together for them to use. So that's one thing that I had to be clear. And going to your question, the other thing would be like, you have developed something, and then, when you do the next sprint, there's another feature that is being developed, and you have to make sure that the integration works. But for the customer, it would be just one. That's why this test automation has to come into play, where you have the integration tools, where, whatever, if you do the second thing, you are done means it's not that it should be working within your machine. It should be working in your build and test environment, where you have all the other pre-developed features. So when you say you are done with the second sprint, that means it has to be completed and deployed in your BNT environment, or the build and test environment, where it has all the integration. So if the deployment fails, that means you are not done with this feature. Any other questions? No more questions? I will try to cover this as well. Again, it's about the attitudes of the team members. This again, I thought this might be useful for you all as well. Again, when it comes to the mindset, now I was talking right throughout about this mindset, agile thinking, agile mindset. And if you take a team member also, that particular individual should have the same mindset as well. Now the properties that a good agile team member should have would be, being energetic, empathetic. That means, you should be willing to share your workload, not having your personal goals, and you should be eager to extend your skill sets, because that is also quite important, because in real life you have to learn all the time. There's no such thing called you're done with learning. That's the reality. And then another term, it's genuinely friendly. I hope you know the difference between being friendly and genuinely friendly. Those are two different, contrasting two different things, being friendly and being genuinely friendly. But in an agile team, you have to be genuinely friendly with your team members. And then, you should respect the ideas of your others. Maybe it can be a very senior person, whether it can be a person who has just joined, but you have to have that mutual respect. Again, it correlates with one of the strong core values. And then, you should be courageous enough to, do whatever things that is being assigned to you. And you have to be open enough to, with the questions and, giving feedback as well as receiving feedback, both directions. And then you should be honest, obviously, and then you have to be committed on the things that you do. Those are some, abilities or the attitudes that some team members should have. Again, coming back, it's good to have people who are very, very skillful. But normally what some says is, if you have two individuals to be chosen for a team, if you have one person who's very skilled and, very good with a not so good attitude, and if you have a person who's averagely skilled and a positive attitude, normally some suggest you have to go for the second person always. It's simply because, when you have the proper attitude, as a team, you can achieve a lot. So that is very, very important. Maybe that person might not have the best skill. I don't know whether you agree with me or not. If you have watched the T20 World Cup that Sri Lanka won, can you recall that those days, not the present situation? If you can remember, Dinesh Chandimal became the captain, and he was not performing. And towards the end of the tournament, I think he was carrying water for the other team members. So he played his role. It's about the team effort. It's about achieving a common goal. Whether you bring water to your teammate or whether you thrash 100, it doesn't really matter. At the end, it's a team effort that we talk about to get the maximum through. I mean, there are so many different examples that you could get. I mean, if you take the football World Cup, I don't know whether you all are fans of football. If you take the finals between Germany and Argentina, right? Germany won. But if we ask you, I mean, what are the star players in Germany, you might not come up with so many names unless you are very familiar. But if it's Argentina, you have big names like Lionel Messi. But still they lost. Again, it's about a team effort, where you try to chip in and contribute the way that you can for the betterment of the team. So that's the thinking that you should have when it comes to this particular context. I know it's challenging, it's difficult, but that's how it is. Okay, any other questions that you have? It's too much information to you, so I try to reduce as much information as possible, but there are certain elements that I thought it would be good to touch. I've been talking a lot for like 3 hours now, 3 hours minus 15 minutes of course, and maybe we do a very, very short activity, a very brief activity. Are you ready for that? We have listened a lot about Scrum and Agile. Do you have any other questions on things that I have covered so far before I move on? If not, I'll assume that you know all the fundamentals and concepts. Okay, this is a very, very simple activity. I think it would be good if you can get into groups, and I would like to have 4 groups, 4 different groups. You can decide who the group members are, but maybe you can stick together so that you know that you are a group. And you just discuss and put your hands up when you have a group form. It should be 4 different groups. So no hands up. So that means I'm assuming that there are no groups that form. Okay, one group is for form. See, there are some conflicts. This group is done. So you can give some. Other groups, you are done. Okay. Other 2 groups, have you all sorted out? Sorted out. Right, okay. Maybe you all might have to be closer a little bit together because we are talking about individuals and interactions, and if you want to interact with the person at the back, it would be difficult. So maybe try to think of a way where you can interact with each other. This would be a group activity, very simple, short one. Doing things in a different way. You have this traditional analyze, design, and implement and test phase, and then I was talking about turning this around and looking at different features, where we try to give a business value to the customer, and then I was talking about these features. Again, if you can remember, a business value and a marketable feature, 2 different things. And if it's a feature, we are talking about a business value, not a marketable feature. Right? If you can remember this Developmet example. And then I was talking a little bit about the user story. Normally, a user story would be something that will represent a business value. That means, normal template could be a user story should be a brief statement of intent that describes something that the system needs to do. Something that the system needs to do, not in terms of a developer, in terms of a customer, a benefit that the customer could get. Normally what says, as a user I want what, so that's why simply, as your son, I want to go home before 6:30 so that I can watch the second session of the cricket match. Does it make sense? Instead of asking, are you going home at 5:30, what's the route that you are taking, those kind of questions.
as your son, I want to go home before 6:30 so that I can watch my cricket. The solution might be my father providing me transport to go home. The solution might be my father has decided to go to one of his friends to watch the match, and maybe he might invite me to go to that place as well. That's why, the why part is also important. If we have not mentioned why part, it would not happen. If I said, I want to go home at 6:30, then what happens is the solution would be to my father to give me transport to home by 6:30. But it will not, give the business solution. So, as who I want what, so that why.
So why is the final objective?
Why is the final objective? Why I need this? Instead of having, I need to have a table window where, there should be a text field. I mean, there's no point having a text field, right? But instead of having, I need to have a window where I can search for jobs. It makes some business value. I could write a UI with a text field where I can have two numbers entered here, a different interpretation. Right? Isn't it? I could have a UI defined with one text field where I will expect a number would be 23,46. Right? Now, that's what you asked. That's what I am going to give you. Isn't it? Right? Now, what would be the different thinking that we should have? Two text fields. Two text fields, but still I will get rid of this and this, but I will have this. Okay? Right. Okay? We will try to think in the same line. That's fine. That's fine. It's a very simple solution. If I say, now have you mentioned why here? Two text fields. For what? For what and why? Why you need it? Have you mentioned that? You already mentioned that. You said simply I need two text fields, so I could have placed those two text fields, one at this point, one at here. Fine, two text fields. Right. What would be the slight change that we could do? I will just try to explain this and then see whether you can get some in. As a user, I should be able to see all the numbers between start and end on the display so that I can make sure that the numbers are displayed in the expected manner. Have I mentioned about two text fields? I'll give you some time.
You have not mentioned that specifically, but you have said between start and end.
So that means there should be an input for this solution.
Yeah.
It can be two text fields, it can be two input boxes, it can be read from a file, it can be one text box with a separator, it can be anything, because that is not needed for me. What I need is maybe to get this display first to see that we can get some display here about the alignments and different columns or whatever. So that was my expectation. As a user, I should be able to see all the numbers between start and end. So it would be number range between start and end on the display. That means I'm talking about a display here. On the display, so that I can make sure that the numbers are displayed in the expected manner. So that's my expectation. Expectation would be I have to have a display, because maybe somewhere later I would be expecting some real values here, number values. But for that I need to make sure that the display is in the proper place to give you the feedback. Now, when I say like this, I can even have a text box here, a button. But still I need to have the display here somewhere. So it can be like this, it can be a different thing, but still we have to have the display. Maybe you will have a small display, then I can give you feedback, or this is not enough, I need to have a bigger display. I can start giving you the feedback immediately. Until you have developed everything, and you would have written a display like this, and then if the number range is very big, then you have problems with scrolling and everything. Right? So it's just about trying to give what I want and why I need it. then you all can decide whether it's an input box, because it doesn't really matter whether it's, we don't need to have two text fields like this. It's not needed, right? It's just a matter of deciding the range, the start and the end. Do you need to have validations for this if you implement this? Let's say now I have given this feature, so you start off with two text fields. You can use a start value and end value, and then whatever the numbers between that will be displayed here. And then let's say what will happen if I put 100 at the start and 1 at the end. Will it work, or what would be your solution? There should be an error message coming in, or there should be some way that you have to handle it. It involves testing, that means. When you give a solution, okay, now at the beginning, after the first user story, you have a display, you have start and end, and then you have a button or whatever, or a validation where you can show the numbers. When you click it, if you have characters, if this crashes, that means the solution is not shippable. It's not potentially shippable. Why? You have not done the testing. It's not about giving the solution only. It's all about doing the validations, doing the testing, everything. Then it adds a business value. But with that, will I be able to use it in production? No, because my ultimate goal is not to display a set of numbers, maybe to get the Fibonacci series or a prime numbers, whatever. But still, this adds a business value to my solution. Does it make sense? Okay, with that, try to come up with the second user story. So that I can use it for
Enter new set of numbers.
next set of numbers. The last part, Y part, do you think it's needed or not needed? How many of you have written, as a user, I should be able to clear the numbers without Y part? You have not written anything. My question would be now, as a user, I should be able to clear the numbers so that I can use it for entering the other numbers. My question is, the very last part, Y part, is it needed or not needed? Needed. Why?
Otherwise, when you are clearing, you just take the field and you will store the numbers elsewhere.
So I didn't get it.
There is already value there. So when you are saying clear it, without second part, you don't know why you are clearing it. You can store it somewhere else, or just to add a new set of number by clearing the entire.
So even if you don't know why you are clearing it, but you still can clear it, right?
Yeah, but you are leaving room for interpretation.
You are leaving. So what sort of interpretation that would come up when clearing? Again, remember this discussion is important, not the answers. Right? It's good that we have this discussion. This is the learning curve for you. Now clearing, what is the complications or the misinterpretation that could have happened?
Sometimes we clear that this start and that value also clear. So
Yeah, one point, yes. When you clear, it's not clear, right? Whether it's to clear the display or whether it's clear. When I say so that I can use it for some other values in display, then it indirectly says that you don't need to clear this. Maybe this one, but maybe in the feedback they might say, oh no, look here, if I have to use it, then this has to be cleared as well, or not. It depends on the customer's content. But yeah, true, that is true. What else? Now again, trying to be a developer now, I'm just trying to be a little bit technical here. Now let's say you have one story saying, as a user, I should be able to see all the numbers between start and end, blah, blah, blah. So what I would do is I will not have a separator here. I will just have a list field, two text fields wherever, and then a button to show. Then the next question, next user story would be to, as a user, I should be able to clear the numbers. So technically what I would do is I will have a button which says clear, and on the button click event I will say list view xyz dot clear. Done. Technically, right? Then when I get a user story saying that I as a user I should be able to clear the numbers so that it can be used for other functions, then I will start realizing as a developer, okay, now that means this might be, I might need to call this different times. So instead of writing code in the button click event, I should be writing a separate small method where it clears this, so that it can be called in different points. So that decision I can take it only because I have the last part, the Y part. Because now I get the impression, okay, this might be I might have to use this in the future, because so that I will be clear in it, so that I can as a user, I should be able to clear the entire display so that I can use it for other dashboard activities. So that means I can assume that there might be some other dashboard activities coming in, so that it's better I can have if I can have it, move it to a method. Can you see? No. Sometimes we might see, defining, why is not necessarily needed, but sometimes it adds more value to the developer itself. Okay. Right. I think I will not go further because of time constraints, but again, I think you got the idea, right? The thinking. Or do you have any other questions or concerns?
No, it's that last part, that's the Y part. Does that directly transform into a functionality, or is it indirectly you're trying to see if the first and second parts are okay?
Certain situations it might transfer to a functionality. Certain situations it might represent the business need. So then, I mean, if it represents the business need, sometimes the developers might come up with a different solution. That's perfectly fine, because you don't need to have a text box and those kind of things. I mean, they can have different interactions.
Like that, your example with the Swiss Army knife, sometimes in the lean method you might
try to
put garbage.
Exactly. You try to put garbage.
Yeah, so you can justify that this is not garbage because you want this.
Exactly. Yes. True. So, 1 minute, I need some power source. I will not go into the other features, but you have to think in that line. It's all about trying to identify the features or the customer needs. Any other questions?
I think that also comes with experience also.
Exactly. It comes with the experience as well. True. Quite true. Quite true. Sometimes I do this the other way around, where I give the features and I ask students to implement it, and then I try to after the demo I try to test it, and then try to come up with problems. It happens because normally when we develop, we have the tendency of trying to develop everything at one stage without trying to make sure that whatever we have developed is stable. Okay, I will keep these parts, different examples, and I will move on to Kanban a little bit. And in Kanban, actually, it's not that complicated. Normally, Kanban talks about, you all can reset back again. When it comes to Kanban, actually, normally Kanban talks about mainly two things. It's about visualizing what you do, and it's about limiting what you do. Visualizing and limiting. I mean, simple example would be, that's where the name workflow boards comes into play, where you try to visualize things through something called a workflow board. It can be a physical workflow board, or it can even be a soft workflow board. If you use something like Jira or EFS, you can define your workflow boards the way you want. But the whole idea here is to visualize the workload of the team. Again, trying to visualize things so that when the things are visualized, the common goals are very clear and the statuses are very clear. So visualizing things is very important. So what Kanban says is it's simply visualizing what you have. That's one dimension. And for you all to get some idea, even though this is the theoretical Kanban board, in practically a Kanban board might look like this. This is a real example of a team's Kanban board, where it can be, it can be, as an external person, we will not be able to identify what this is. And for us, it's very difficult to interpret what it is. But for the team, it would be very clear for them. So it's about visualizing things within the team. It's not about visualizing what they do to the others. It's about trying to visualize things within them, within the team itself. So that is one aspect that comes in with Kanban, visualizing things. And then there's something called limiting what you do. We call it as WIP limits, or work in progress limits. It's like, you don't take all the items at once. You always try to limit what you can do in parallel and try to, complete those items, and then you try to pick the other items in. And what is the advantage of, again now, we are always trying, we are always talking about, having better throughputs, we are always talking about efficiency, effectiveness, and then what we are saying is we are trying to visualize things and we are trying to limit what we do.
And if we are trying to limit what we do, how can we, how can we improve the optimization, or rather, how can we improve the efficiency? Because we are trying to limit things. Do you think it makes sense, or is it kind of contradictory? Visualizing, I think it's very clear. It's like visualizing the workload. Then the next point would be WIP limits, like work in progress limits. You try to limit the things that you do. How are we going to achieve efficiency or productivity through limiting work?
With the unnecessary things, what are unnecessary outside the scope?
I mean, the things that you do outside the scope can be eliminated. Yeah, normally, that comes in with lean thinking, where lean talks a lot about software waste. So maybe that is also playing a slight role here, but there's some other thinking behind this. Let's just assume, let's say, we are a small team, development team, and we have like 5 members working together. And now we, as a team, we have a certain throughput. This is the capacity that we could work. These are the items that we could finish during a certain period of time. So we know our capacity. And now we want to improve our capacity, or maybe we need to improve our throughput. And then maybe, let's say, as a team, we get together and discuss about it, how we can improve. And then let's say I will start talking. I will be the person who will be, investigating the problems of the customer. Let's say we work in a team where we do product support. So that means customers will be giving us some problems. So we need to analyze that, and then we need to create, if it's a problem, we need to create a bug, and then we need to implement it, and then test it, and then QA it, and then deliver it. That's the simple thing that we do. Then I will be the person who would be investigating whether the problem is an actual problem or not. And maybe she would be the person who would be doing the implementation if it's a bug. And you would be the person who would be doing the verification part. And maybe she would be the person who's doing the quality assurance part. And then we get together. Now we have a certain throughput. And then we start talking. Okay, I will start saying, okay, now look here. I'm not working to my maximum capacity. Maybe I can do a little bit more work. And then she might say, I'm overloaded. I'm full with my capacity. I simply can't, get any more work. I might need some help. And then you might say, okay, I'm also fully loaded. I will also need some help. And the other person might say, okay, I don't have much work, so I can also help. But then maybe we can get together and maybe we can start helping her out. But still, we might end up getting the same throughput. Why is that? So we are trying to help the bottleneck here, but still we might end up getting the same throughput. That means we are not improving as a team. Why is it? Simple example. Let's say flow controlling mechanism. Let's say you have a system. You have water inflow, and you have receiving, investigate, fixing, verifying, QA, different calls. Simple thing, the maximum throughput of this particular system would be the minimum throughput would be equal to the place where you have the minimum capacity, isn't it? Simple as that. But if you look at this particular person might say I'm overloaded. This particular person also might say I'm overloaded. The other two, they will say I can work a little bit more and I can help the others. And if you start helping this particular person because he's overloaded, will it make an impact for the entire system? It will not. Right? Isn't it? So instead what you do is, you first try to reduce the intake. You limit what you do. You keep on reducing, you keep on limiting, and then there will be a point where you will start visualizing that where the actual bottleneck is. So when you limit what we take, instead of trying to have this discussion, we start off with limiting what we take, and then there will be a particular point of time where only one person might say, look here, I'm still overloaded, but the others are still have some capacity to work. Then the bottlenecks are clearly identified, and then you can properly rectify those problems. Again, inspect and adapt in the proper way. Proper inspection and adaptation. It's not about adaptation. Earlier we were adapting. We were helping her out, but still we end up with the same throughput. Maybe we were helping this particular person. Similar. So we were adapting, but still we were not getting the expected result. But here we were adapting accordingly. And then we are adapting the bottleneck,
and then we can adjust the width limit again. So width limit is not something that is written on stone. It would be something that has to be tuned all the time. That has to be tuned all the time. And then you can increase the limit again, and then you can do the same thing again. So this is the science of width limits. It comes in with flow controlling mechanisms. If you know physics a little bit and maths a little bit. Right. Okay. Then you can fix the next level, and you can keep on going. Right. That's one angle. So when it comes to width limits, this is one thing that you could fix with width limits. That's one thing. There's a second angle as well. Is this angle clear to everyone? Clear. Okay. The next one, I will try to take a simple example. Again, a simple mathematical example. Let's say you have point A and point B, and what you need to do is, you need to send 1,000 cars from point A to point B through the shortest period of time, as quickly as possible in short terms. Now you have a set of cars, 1,000 cars. You need to put them, let them go from A to B with the least amount of time. Now, what would be your approach? Sorry? Using big container, put the cars and go. Right. I have a big container which can take 6 cars. The container's maximum speed would be, let's say, 10 kilometers per hour to make things simple. The cars would be Ferraris. Would it work?
That depends on the length, on the distance.
Depends on the length. Okay, length would be distance. Start distance between A to B. Yes, the length would be, let's say, 60 kilometers. So 10 kilometers per hour, 60 kilometers. It takes 6 hours for the lorry to transfer 6 cars. I have a Ferrari which can fly for 100 kilometers per hour. Did I answer your question? Okay. Okay, that's fine. Any other? Yeah.
What about the resources? Do you have 1,000 drivers to take that in one go?
What about the resources? Yes, you have 1,000 drivers. Sorry?
The road also, you can go at any speed you want.
Yes, there are no policemen. Yes, it's 2 lanes, 2 clear lanes as it is. No policemen standing. It's very clear out here. But there are some bends on.
1,000 flyovers is
Sorry?
1,000 flyovers will be feasible.
No. Yes, that's the only way.
How fast do you have to need it? How fast do you have to need it? You can find
Very as fast as possible, as quickly as possible.
Is any more resources you can take?
What kind of resources?
Well, drivers, all this.
Yeah, the cars will have enough fuel to go from A to B. Yes.
Do we need to send 1,000 cars?
Yes, we need. We have 1,000 cars. It has to be sent from A to B within the shorter period of time. Sorry? Again, try to think. Now, it's good that you have questions. I totally facilitate that, but I encourage that as well. But still, we need to have a solution now. We need to deliver a project between 2 weeks, and you simply can't take 2 years to deliver that, right? You can ask questions. It's good, but still, you need to give a solution, right? 10 drivers, okay. Okay, you tell the drivers to go. Okay, simple. That means you ask one driver to go, and then once he has reached B, you ask the other driver to go. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. 1,000 cars start with the same time. So that means
One after the other.
so every 1,000 will not fit into this particular road. It's just 2. You can go just 2 cars at one. So that means you just you let 2 cars go, immediately you let the other 2 go. You let the other 2 go. So you keep on sending 2 by 2. Right? Okay. Good. Thank you. That was the answer that I was expecting. Will it work? Is that the best option?
There's no other traffic.
Sorry?
If there's no other traffic, just
If there's no traffic, that will work. Okay. Before answering that question, let me ask you another question. Now, again, traffic example. Let's say you are driving your vehicle, and you stop your vehicle in front of a traffic light. and then you have 5 more vehicles in front of you who are looking at the traffic light, eager to, go when you have not the green, when you even have the yellow light, right? Normally in Sri Lanka we have this definition of a millisecond. Do you know what that it is? The definition of a millisecond is actually when you are the first vehicle in a traffic light, the time between you get the yellow light and the one behind putting their horn. That is the difference between a millisecond. Okay, now what happens is, now let's say you are the fifth vehicle, and when you see the green light, can you immediately start moving your vehicle? Ideally, all the other 4 drivers are also looking at the traffic light, and they should have started moving. But can you move? Can you? No. Why? Same rule applies here. If you send each car one after the other, you will end up with something like this. Why is that? Maybe you all can Google and see. In highways also, especially in Europe, they do different analysis. Yeah, they look at the traffic densities, the amount of vehicles and the traffic densities. And what happens is, if you plot a graph, what happens is when you increase the amount of vehicles and the traffic densities, it's not linear, it's exponential. There's a particular point where we call it as a breaking point, where after a particular point, the traffic goes very high. Why is that? Same rule in small countries applies for the example that I was talking about, the traffic light example.
School hours and office hours, those kinds of, where everyone is trying to go into major cities, then
exponentially it goes. It's because when the number of vehicles increases, the traffic does not increase linearly. It increases exponentially. What is the reason? The real reason?
Well,
close. Yes.
Everyone is. A lot of people are trying to move towards the similar or same destination at a certain given time, whereas in the other off-peak hours,
the amount of resource utilization is bit low.
Yes.
The reason is actually, if you take any system, if you try to utilize the system to the maximum possible utilization point, the system gets too sensitive. What happens is, if you try to utilize the system to the maximum level, it will be too sensitive even for a small change. Like for example, let's say if you take this, if you keep on sending 2 cars at each other, and if one car brakes for just 2 seconds, the impact would be not 2 seconds. Impact would be exponential for all the cars at the behind. We think, if we are so close to the other car and, whenever we have the green light, it will be quicker. It is not. Why? Different people will go with different paces, but still we are trying to utilize the entire system to the maximum potential, and it will not work. It doesn't mean that you need to send one car after the other, one car and then wait till that reaches the end. No, but you have to have a certain gap, and it depends on certain different constraints. It depends on the driver's skills. It depends on the speed that they can go. It depends on the different impediments that you have on the road. It depends on different things. But if it's a complex system, it's a matter of again, tuning your whip limit to see where the actual most efficient throughput is. So it's about tuning it. It's not about trying to utilize the maximum, because what we are trying to achieve is actually the productivity, maximum productivity. But still, to do that, it's not about utilizing maximum. Let's say now 5 of us are working, and all 5 are working to our maximum capacity. And we are working in a team, a dependent team, where we depend on each other. And if she is sick for let's say 2 hours, and she has to go early, it will have an impact for all of us. So the impact that as a team we would get would be exponentially expanded if you are working to a maximum capacity. It doesn't mean that you have to be relaxed and work. No, but you have to be a little bit smart. We are still trying to get the maximum throughput, but to do that, we just try to limit the things that we do and try to fine tune where our maximum our optimized throughput is. And it depends on the context. We simply can't say this should be your whip limit. It shouldn't be something like that. It should be something that you have to always inspect and adapt. Does it make sense? I will try to give a very classic example, then you will realize, I hope you will realize. let's say you have a team where you get the same inflow, and you don't have too many work in progress items. You just get it and you finish it down. Right? Then what happens is you still have the same inflow. You still have the same inflow, but you have some items which are in progress on hand, which are not done. Right? The same inflow, but then you have your capacity working fine. But the moment you increase your in progress items a lot, what will happen is it will be like this. I'll give you some time to look at this. Notice the inflow is the same. The inflow would be the same. Now mapping back, we were talking about sustainable development. Can you remember? Maybe for for this dog for 5 minutes, it might have some throughput. But if this dog wants to do this for 2 days, it will be like this, obviously. Right? Again, mapping it to what we were talking about, agile principles, sustainable development. If we have to sustain, it's not about running fast and getting a rest. It's all about doing something at a certain level. I hope you got this idea. And since we are running out of time, maybe I'll move on. And when it comes to Scrum-Ban, again, this is not rocket science. Normally what happens is, when it comes to Scrum focuses on, as I mentioned earlier, project-based teams where they try to deliver a solution to a particular customer. And when it comes to Kanban, normally Kanban comes with the manufacturing industry, but what happens is when it comes to software product maintenance or the product support teams, you simply can't use Kanban as it is because, you simply can't use Scrum as it is because simply, Scrum focuses on development and it will not suit for a product maintenance space. Whereas Scrum-Ban is actually a mix of Scrum and Kanban, where you can use it for product support, where certain elements like things like daily stand-up meetings, short planning meetings can be still used for product maintenance, but you will not have things like sprint demos. But on the other hand, you will always try to visualize what you do, and you always try to limit what you do so that you can finish items as quickly as possible for the customer. Because again, as I mentioned, 90% done item is 0%. If there is 0% usable for the customer, it doesn't add value. If you are working on 5 different bugs as a team, and none of the bugs are finished for the customer, 5 bugs are not finished, so 0 value. Instead, if we work on just 3 bugs and if 2 are finished, then customer has some value. 2 out of 5 are done. So that's the thinking, and that facilitates Scrum-Ban. So the thinking of Scrum-Ban is actually a combination of Scrum and Kanban. The only difference would be you might not have the sprint demos because the team will not be working on short feedback loops. Instead, they will be working on a support mode where they always try to deliver business value as and when it is available. As and when it is available. So that's the only difference. So I will not go into deeper details. This itself would be a different topic, but just wanted to touch on this because I was told that it's good that I touch this a little bit. And also when it comes to any other questions on this? And again, when it comes to large scale software, I mean, when it comes to Scrum and Kanban, everything normally goes around those two. I have not touched Lean a bit, but when it comes to large scale organizations, there are different frameworks that some organizations use because one large product being developed by 20-30 teams, which will be used by hundreds of customers. Then adapting Scrum as it is might not be the solution. So there are different ways of doing things, and most of those kind of organizations, they normally try to have their own blends. But now in the industry also there are some evolving techniques. This is not evolving, this has already evolved. One such technique is called SAFe. It's called Scaled Agile Framework. Again, I will not try to explain this. This is again itself a different training session. But what happens is, the whole thinking is actually one large product where it is being developed by multiple teams, and then you need to synchronize the entire project. So that means that a single team cannot simply look at the entire project because the project is too large. Then there are different people who has the responsibility on
looking at the different angles of the product itself. Those people are called release engineers, and this particular solution is called release train. But I will again not go into deeper details so that you know that there's something called SAFe. You can always go, just type SAFe, and then you can go to the SAFe website and get some insight. But if you need more details, maybe we need to have a separate session on this, because itself would be a kind of a different topic. Yeah. This is an evolving technique, and some organizations like Philips are using SAFe as it is, but when it comes to large organizations, normally they have their, again, own blends. Sometimes might be in terms of SAFe, or maybe the other point could be, there's a similar kind of framework which was developed from the Scrum guys that is called LESS. That's called large scale Scrum. This is also kind of quite similar to SAFe, but there are some differences. One such difference is, if I go back, now here what happens is, this program backlog would be your entire product backlog, and then different teams will have their own team backlogs. Whereas on the list, what happens is there will be one product backlog, and all the teams will be picking items from the same product backlog. So that's the clear difference between less and SAFe, but all the other concepts are the same, but the terms that they use are kind of different, but still the responsibilities are kind of similar. So I just wanted to explain these few things, because just so that you can get some idea on what it is, but again I will not go into details because of the time constraints that we have. Okay, any other questions that you have?
In user stories, there's a thing called Epic, where they say they organize a number of user stories together. So what's based generally?
Yeah, good. The thing is, actually, when it comes now, can you remember I was talking about something called a marketable feature and a business value. A business value normally maps into a user story, where it would be something that adds a value to the business. But a marketable feature would be an epic. Because if it's an epic, that means it would be something that can be used by the customer in the market itself. So epic would be a bigger thing, like epic would be a collection of user stories. And normally, in technical terms, what they say is an epic would be something that a team should not be able to finish within a sprint. But a user story should be something that a team should be able to finish within a sprint. So epic would be a larger scale of a user story. The requirement is not highly recognized, but maybe high level. Okay, just to recap, then I was talking a lot about agile concepts and agile principles. The reason why I talked a lot about agile principles was actually knowing the principles is one thing, and understanding them is a different thing. And when we try to apply it in the real life, normally we go again on the waterfall direction. I mean, that's where the real complexity comes in. And we can do hundreds of activities to that, different things. Even self-organizing itself can be done with a 2-hour session to get the insight. But then I was talking a lot about, again, Scrum, the fundamentals and the Scrum framework and the values and the mindset. Then I talk a lot about Kanban as well, the WIP limits and the workflow boards. And then when it comes to Scrumban and SAFe and LESS, I just touched on them so that you know that there's something called this. And if you are interested, you can always Google and find information on this again. But again, mapping would be a little bit complicated, but still you can get the basic principles and the concepts and thinking behind it. But in a nutshell, if you think about Agile, it's more like a mindset. It's about how we should think about things. Whether it's software development, whether it's driving, whether it's cooking, whatever, it's a thinking that we talk about. Okay, with that said, I think I have taken 5 more additional minutes. Sorry about it. Do you have any other questions for the last time?
Are there projects where Agile cannot be applied?
Are there projects where Agile cannot be applied? There can be. Example, let's say you have a project to be delivered within 1 month, and anyhow there will be a certain set of features that needs to be delivered, and you have few team members who can do it. But then if you try to let them self-organize and if you try to let them do their work on their own, it will not work because you need to deliver it within one month. Then maybe you need to have a project manager and guide them so that you can deliver it. It might be the best way. So if it's a short term, if you're thinking in terms of short term benefits, Agile might not be the solution.
Another small question,
Yeah.
do you all get from this, do you all find that there are dedicated or loyal customers, because you can they work very well with the teams they work closer with the team. So do you find that compared to the previous traditional methods or no
well,
difference?
it differs because normally for the customer, whether we do it the agile way or whether we do it something different, it doesn't really matter. What they need is the business value being delivered.
Yeah, but the thing is now, if a separate development company takes over, their requirements are not there. They'll have to again start from scratch. The same company, for example, your company works. Your teams will be working with the changing environment all the time. So that's
Yeah. So in that case, yes, because the customers will start seeing a value because whenever they give us some requirements, they start seeing some response very quickly. Then they see it as a positive sign, whether it's agile or not. What they say is, now this particular company, they try to deliver something very quickly. So we are happy with that. Then customers are happy. But if you do it the wrong way, then there will be problems as well. I mean, like for example, there can be some legal things like that. For example, if it's a fixed price project, then there will be different projects. So it depends on the project that you do as well.
same thing with the doctor.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. Right. Thank you very much for your time. Sorry that I have taken 6 more minutes of your time.
PK has helped us a lot during the courses in the last 2 years. So thank you very much because this is a kind of special group in the final year. So they have industry exposure and before they go, I think it's kind of the thing will be very useful for them to refresh what is really practiced and what's the concept behind it. Okay, thank you very much. I also enjoyed the talk.
Thanks. Thank you.